Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Brand Innovators livecast series. My name is Emily Agate, and I'm one of the program directors here at Brand Innovators. We're so excited to be featuring a range of amazing speakers today on a really exciting topic, all about how to modernize your brand without losing its legacy. Today's brands have found unique and creative ways to modernize their brands while still appreciating and capitalizing on the history of their brands. I'm thrilled to be kicking off today's event and serving as our MC for the day. We have an awesome lineup of brands coming up soon, including Sperry, Unilever, Dell, Northwestern Mutual, and KFC. We'd like to thank all of our marketers for taking the time today to speak on our stage, and a huge shout out to our sponsors for making the event possible. For all of our audience who's tuning in, please submit questions throughout the program. We would love to hear from you. And I know that our speakers would love to answer any thoughts that you have on the material that they present. Feel free to submit the link to any colleagues that you think might want to attend, and they can tune in straight from there. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first panel for the day. We're so excited to be hearing from James McKenzie, the Brand Marketing Director at Sperry, along with Sarah Loon, the Director for Digital at Sperry as well. And the moderator will be Michaela Atkinson, the Head of Content at Dash Hudson. Hi, everyone. How are you?
Hi, great. Thanks so much for having us, Emily.
Of course, so glad to have you guys kicking us off today. So excited to hear from Sperry, and don't want to waste any time, so I'll hand it over to you to take it from here, Michaela.
Perfect, great. Hi, Jim. Hi, Sarah. So nice to be connected today, and I'm excited for our interview. One of my favorite parts of my job is getting insights from all of the amazing marketing professionals that I have the opportunity to connect with through Dash Hudson. So thanks, Brand Innovators, for hosting. And yeah, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
Wonderful. And so I kind of wanted to start off the conversation today with a very, very important question, which is socks or no socks?
I'm team no sock right now, but you have to understand this is fluid and it could change should I get the courage to style my boat shoes with cool socks one day soon. So we'll see, but team no sock for now.
Okay,
Nice.
fair enough. So yeah, for those who haven't seen it, our sort of sock debate, you get in those shoulder seasons where you still want to wear the boat shoes, but it's a little chilly. I think it was 6 degrees out this morning, walking the kids to school. So I'm team sock today. But as soon as I can get into shorts and some lighter clothing, the socks come off and boat shoes are worn as is.
Yeah, it's good to have that flexibility, and also great that you can style them both ways. So lots of room to be fashionable there. But yeah, so to getting a little bit more on topic here, we're meeting today to talk about how to modernize your brand without losing the legacy, which is definitely a topic that I know a lot of our legacy customers deal with. You know, it's a modern era of marketing, and it's definitely a big undertaking to usher a brand kind of into a new phase. So I'd love to start off actually with level setting, though, about what Sperry's legacy story is. Can you both tell us more about the history of the brand?
Yeah, I'll start on this one. It's funny because a lot of times you don't know how deep to get into your past when speaking to a consumer about your future. In this case, our consumer told us through research, please tell us more. We want to hear about where you came from. So Sperry was started by a sailor and inventor. He had been in the Navy. His name was Paul Sperry, who fell off the deck of his wet boat while sailing in the Long Island Sound. And couldn't understand why his dog never had any traction issues. So he looked at the bottom of his paw, saw the grooves that were there. It was a Cocker Spaniel who had great traction. And he tried to mimic that on a rubber outsole and actually created the first a style of shoe that's called a CVO. Before people named Stan Smith were playing tennis and before skate brands were doing it, Paul Sperry actually invented the first one. And so sort of three icons for the brand are 87, are what you may know as a topsider, our authentic originals, 85 years old. And then another core product for us was invented in the 40s. So three icons that are over 80 years old. And the consumer told us, we want to know the story because it's a purposeful product that was invented for a reason, to solve an issue that someone was having. And we see that as real, an overused term, so I apologize, but an authentic reason behind the brand and where you are today.
Absolutely. And I think authentic is overused just because it is so core to doing marketing well. So even though it's a term we might throw around a lot, we hope it doesn't lose meaning, because there is so much value in that authentic brand story. And it's great to hear that your customer base wants to hear more about that story. So how have you been sharing that story with consumers? I did see some of your #Sperry archives content, which was a great peek into that narrative. But yeah, tell us more about how you're sharing the legacy story online.
Yeah, I can share. So Jim touched on the research that we have on the consumer being interested. So of course we get together and we ideate on, okay, so how can we tell them more? So, there's little things like, if you follow the brand for a long time, some of our logo placements would lead with, since 1935, right? And Jim talked about these products that are over 80 years old, and that really lands the message. But in terms of the archive, we said, why not put out images that we have that are clearly very old, and to use the word authentic again, you don't get more authentic than that. So we started sharing these fun visuals on social and an email, and we built out our history a little bit more on .com. So I'd say wherever we can, we're leading with that history, and whether it be press, sometimes in paid editorial opportunities, and it's really part of our larger story, and it relates back to what we're doing now. And whenever we can use pictures of Paul Newman or JFK in the product, legally, we will. And it's really just the ultimate authenticator. And we know that we are often imitated and never replicated, right? So we want to continue to land that with the consumer. And you'll see more of that from the brand as we begin to position ourselves in front of a new consumer. So just honoring the past and then drawing on that inspiration for the future, but at the same time, not using it as a crutch rather. It's, if I'm a consumer, amazing, love the background, but what are you doing now? And I think we'll get into some of that.
Yeah.
Paul Newman and JFK, the original influencers. Amazing. And yeah, you kind of just hinted at it there. I'm sure, maybe perhaps consumers have started to see some shifts with the brand themselves, but you have shared with me that Sperry is currently undergoing a branding update. So I love that you're kind of starting off by telling that story and level setting, but then what is it like ushering this heritage brand into a new era? And what are some of the biggest challenges perhaps that you face in that process?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is people are resistant to change, and we don't own the brand. We just work here. The consumers, the people that are loyal to us, that have been with us throughout the years, they own the brand, and they get to tell us what our permissions are. So we were looking, for anyone who may notice a slight change, if you were to go to Sperry.com today, you'll be seeing some paid media later this week. It's a subtle update, but we were looking for something like, our icon needed to feel a bit more organic, like sort of from the water itself, to be a bit more open and inviting. We wanted something with movement as we get back to sort of on water performance, that's what the original Sperry product was. It was meant to solve a performance issue on the water. So as we do those things, we wanted to update our icons and update colors and design choices around that. But the first thing we had to do was check in with sort of our loyal fans and say, like, are you okay with this? And they were. Largely they felt that it was a good combination of sort of nostalgic but moving the brand forward. It's not a big shift, but ultimately too, as the stewards of the brand, should we look to enter into any new categories in the future, any expansion in territories, we want to do it in a mindful, meaningful way. And so consultation, cross-functioning with everyone, sales, all parts of the organization, product design in particular, to make sure that we were on the right track. So it's something you don't do lightly, and we don't do often. But in this case, if we can sort of unify behind a new ethos and move the brand forward, then we felt it was the right time to do it.
Absolutely. It's so exciting that it's a really kind of pivotal time at the brand. And yeah, maybe we can share a little bit more about what this new brand story that Sperry is telling with the audience as well.
Yeah, it was my Zoom background there for about 30 seconds before I changed it to this one. So the campaign is, I say that I don't like brand campaigns if they're a campaign on its own. It's a rallying cry as well. It's called Make Waves. I think for a campaign to be successful, I think it needs to challenge the people who work at the brand. It needs to challenge our retailers and partners to maybe think of us in a new way, as well as reach the consumer. So for us, Sperry is all about the joy of being on or by the water. Going back to that research, the consumer it's a multi-sensorial experience, and it sort of comes as you get closer to the water. You may see it before you hear it, before you smell it, and then you eventually touch it. And if you're lucky and you go underwater, you get to taste it. It's this, this sort of joy and the sense of feeling like your best self when you're by the water. And then there's the heritage of the brand, which is the style that comes from the coast and how you can sort of update your own style. Look, we're all getting back out there into the real world. You sort of want that casual comfort that also can be dressed up for that night out later. And we think we've really got that dialed in. For us too, Make Waves is about, and you'll see it in the brand spot, there are real people in that spot. And it's become something that a lot of brands have done. I've done it in my past at other brands as well. But I think it really matters in this case because there are people that are out there working in their communities to make sure that people have equal access to the water or they have the ability to enjoy it. And so for us, it also circles back to internally our brand purpose and what we're trying to do just to change the trajectory of Sperry going forward and why people either want to buy it or want to work at our company.
Well, it really resonates with me as somebody who lives on the ocean and is very into water sports. I love to hear that this is the direction your marketing is taking. And I'm sure you touched on how you have, authentic people represented in your campaign. I'm sure you also are spreading the word with creator marketing. It's a huge piece of digital marketing now. So you have these ambassadors, and how are creators and influencers, how in this landscape of this, how are they all kind of fitting into this strategy together?
I can take that. And I will say, if anybody wants a sneak peek at our Make Waves spot, it's on YouTube. Our paid media hasn't started yet, but it is live there. So take a look. And yes, content creators, ambassadors, influencers, of course, they're part of our marketing strategy. And not only are we executing paid influencer campaigns, but we're choosing to feature creators, like Jim said, real people in our brand content. So off of social media. And that's how the Make Waves video came to life. So you'll see that there, and you'll see more of these people in our content moving forward beyond the Make Wave spot. So, we believe that content creators are imperative to communicating the authenticity. Now this word's going to keep popping up, but also allowing us to resonate with someone who might not have previously considered the brand, right? So we're trying to shift brand perception here. So this is a big part of that. And so we're leveraging their audiences to reposition ourselves through their lens, right? So they're styling the product. Of course, we give guidelines and there's certain products we want to promote, but their literal point of view is so important to us. And that is why we choose to invest here. And really at a certain level of ambassadors for us, these content creators, they're truly an extension of our creative team. They create this beautiful content that we use cross-channel. You'll see it on email.com, our social, on their social, of course. But it's not just for their output. We really use the content in a big way. And it can sometimes be more authentic than we could ever be with just models and an overly produced shoot. But those are important also. But we found that our creators give us another level of content creation. And additionally, like we've learned, and like all of you out there probably who work in social media in any way, shape, or form, that these ever-evolving platforms and algorithms, they make it so posting content alone isn't enough, right? It doesn't mean your content's going to be seen, whether it's posted by the brand or an influencer. So we've built in paid support into our strategy. That's really important to make sure that this beautiful content isn't just sitting there and these product stories are being seen by our intended consumers. And one more thing, one major piece for us this year is measurement of this content that we're putting out there, and measurement of the success of the campaigns with these creators. So we've invested in a tech platform, and that allows us high level to, one, source talent and validate their audiences and dive deeper on their audiences, make sure that these people have followers and create content that we want to be a part of. And then ultimately measure the success of these campaigns in real time so we can report out internally and beyond, take action, and really learn for future efforts.
Absolutely. And I would imagine that data and having a tech partner like that would help kind of soothe the scary factor for a heritage brand, kind of handing over the keys to the brand to others, which I know is a factor that comes up a lot with heritage brands, and understanding how to navigate this influencer and creator landscape, because it's, like you mentioned, pretty much essential at this point to partner, to collaborate, to allow others to interact with and share their perspective on your brand. But it's something that heritage brands traditionally have had a harder time being able to do, especially in the luxury side. So definitely, I'm sure there's some brands on the line who are curious to hear more about that. But I would imagine too that in the same way as it can be scary, that's probably also very enlightening to have others interact with and kind of add their own stamp or spin to your brand. What have you learned? Have you learned anything really interesting about the brand through experimenting with how it's perceived through others and their perspective and lens?
Yeah, their perspective, like I said, the way they style the product. Sometimes it feels like we have like a behind the scenes look to what's next, right? Because these creators and partners are on the cutting edge of fashion and style. So we definitely take notes, right? We're not just like, oh, that's weird. Okay, like go ahead and do it. We're like, oh, maybe we can consider that for our next shoot internally. So it's their content is really important, and they don't work for us full time, right? So we're engaging them for a moment in time. They're not in our Sperry bubble. That, sometimes it's hard to step outside of. So they're out in the world, they're inspired by other brands, other walks of life. They're in different locations across the country or the world. So all of their input is extremely valuable. And, they take the assignment and they really make it their own. And that's what we want to see. And that's what works well. And we can take that point of view into our own more internal efforts and tap into these creators for insights as they come up. Like, we just had this rebrand. We asked some of our longer term brand ambassadors for input on some logo options and other, insights as they arise. So yes, we will squeeze every bit of knowledge and insight out of them that we possibly can.
Amazing. And I think you had also mentioned a really interesting story. You had done an event with some partners and learned about maybe the West Coast preferences for brands. You want to share that story? I loved hearing that.
Yeah, sure. So we do get feedback on the product from time to time. Like I said, we work with some longer term ambassadors, so they maybe feel more comfortable. But this example was an event we held out on the West Coast, an area that we're trying to make our mark on in a bigger way. And the partners that we were working with were new to the brand. So, they had the option to pick some product to wear. And, more than half of them picked this one white sneaker that, really wasn't even on our radar. And that in itself was very telling. Okay, so if all these women are picking this product and they're in an area we want to expand into, what else can we do to promote this product? So of course we had content with them in the product, but it's just an example of something that wasn't even on our radar that popped. It was hard to ignore, and we were able to action pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And it's so great to see, how kind of this next generation of consumer is styling the product and interacting with the brand. And I think that modern styling of the shoe is really well depicted in the High Snobiety collaboration lookbook that you did and that you have featured on your website. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that project?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks for noticing. That's been on our site for a week or so now, and we're going live. So hopefully some of you are seeing it out there in the wild with some paid support behind it. So the task there was to really reintroduce the iconic boat shoe. And we knew we were doing that. This was the goal for the season, and we wanted a partner to help us do that. So High Snob was a natural fit, given that they're a trusted voice in the fashion space, and we really wanted to step outside of our Sperry bubble and engage with people who maybe aren't lovers of the brand, and allow that different perspective to take shape around our product. And that's exactly what we did. We needed these outside voices, and it came together beautifully. So we worked with High Snobiety on the shoot from concept to execution, and we are totally happy, and it met our expectations and beyond. And now, what we want to do is really leverage their platform to give this, what we're calling lookbook for our iconic boat shoe, some real reach. So we don't want to create it, whether it be with a partner or internally, and just have it sit on our site or on social. We wanted people to see it. So that's why this beautiful content is now out there via High Snob's platforms, and getting the reach it deserves. And we really made the choice to fan the flames. So create the content, but also make sure that people see the content. We wanted to reach their audience, and that's what we've been able to do. So yeah, that all started yesterday, and we're out there with this content that we're really proud of in a big way.
Wonderful. Yeah, it gave me lots of inspiration for spring, summer fashion. Now, if the weather could just catch up a little bit faster, that would be great. And before we move on, I do want to call out to the audience. If you have any questions for Jim and Sarah, feel free to submit those to the Q&A. I'm definitely going to leave a couple minutes at the end of our session here for any questions from the audience. But Sarah, you had touched on measurement a bit on your end from the influencer perspective, but Jim, I would love to hear too, what metrics are most important to you to monitor as you're launching the new Sperry branding?
Yeah. So I mean, they range from sort of your campaign goals, and is the content reaching its intended target, and is it successful? So standard sort of campaign metrics, whether it's completion rate, click-through rate, things like that. Just is the content performing, which is great. Longer term though, Wolverine has just a absolute first-class insights organization, which we are allowed to tap into, which is great. They're fantastic partners. And through our just overall brand health tracker, we know that a consumer, once they enter our world, moves through it pretty efficiently. So what we have is to work on awareness, and Sarah sort of mentioned it, reconsideration, really. I mean, that's what when you have a legacy, that's great, but you also may have associated baggage that comes with it. I grew up around Sperry because my father was in the Navy, and that was his sort of off-work attire. Whatever was on top, it ended with Sperry topsider AOs on the bottom. And so everyone has a story like that, where they may only consider what they perceive as the limitations of the brand. So when I look at things like brand trust, I think is probably number one for me as far as moving someone to consideration or reconsideration. And that origin story comes into that trust factor, as well as, do they feel inspired by the brand? A lot of research out there shows that, people get happier even when they start thinking about going on vacation. Well, if we're a brand that sort of is about going to the water and going to those happy places, maybe we can inspire people to feel a little bit better, feel more confident in who they are. Actually, the call I was on before this one was with our partners at PFLAG. Some of the things we're working on for 2022 and beyond. And that's a goal of ours together, is to inspire people to feel like their best selves. So I think those larger brand metrics, if we can change those, and it takes time, but that's what we're doing is, with an 87-year-old brand, you have to afford yourself a bit of patience while you analyze the metrics that are coming in from a given campaign.
Absolutely. And Sarah, any other metrics that you're keeping an eye on as this moves forward?
Yeah, I think, well, we know that what gets measured gets done. So we're definitely held accountable for key metrics, especially when it comes to paid media efforts. And the paid media efforts are big for us this year. We're launching a brand campaign. This is uncharted territory for us in a long time. So in terms of paid media and getting like really specific, we of course are looking at brand awareness. It's a brand campaign consideration and intent. So we'll measure that via some brand lift studies. And then reaction, online traffic, site visits, revenue. So how many people are coming to our site? Yeah, that might not be the goal of the top of the funnel, but ultimately we would love to see, and that's what will happen, is an increase in traffic to site as well. So it's hard to pick just a few, but I think we summarized it there. And knowing it's a brand campaign, it's kind of like those tried and true metrics, and then secondary as we move people down the funnel.
For sure. And you have a lot of wholesale partners, I would imagine, as well. So is that a factor as well? How are you kind of thinking about the impact on that end of the business?
Yeah, I mean, we know that our wholesale partners, look to the brand to see what we're up to, where we're investing. And they're thrilled that we're investing at the brand level, because there will be a halo effect, right? But we know it starts with us. So we're really proud to be able to do that this year. And, the wholesale team and the sales team and our wholesale partners have individual metrics that we should be meeting through sell-through, and we'll continue to monitor those and support our key wholesale partners with content, all this content that we're creating, and updated logos, and just really try to make the brand look fresh and keep it top of mind for those wholesale partners in store or online.
Definitely. And both of you touched on the funnel a little bit there in your answers. And of course, as marketers, we're often talking about the funnel. I think awareness was one of the areas where, Jim, you touched on, you're looking at really increasing that this year. Anything else with the funnel that you're focused on? And how do you kind of plan on really reaching that goal? How are you going to shore up on the top of the funnel?
As Sarah was saying, it's the first real investment we've had in it in the recent past. And I think it's coming at the right time, both as the world hopefully reemerges from the last 2 years and seeks to get out there and sort of rediscover their world and reconnect with it. But also the category in and of itself, like we invented the boat category. And as a footwear category, it is growing. And so retailers look to us to sort of set that agenda and drive that demand. They're not going to, they have their own specific goals and priorities that they set throughout the year. We need to bring new people into the mix, both for them and for ourselves. So to me, new site traffic for ourselves and for our partners, new store traffic is job number one. It's new users to the brand. I think the part of the funnel that I'm most excited about this year is advocacy, is getting the people that are so passionate about the brand, or hopefully soon will become so passionate about the brand, getting them to sort of share their stories, their point of view, and really believe in the brand, our partners, our causes, and just be a bit more invested long-term rather than a single purchase. We know that our product has such a full life value. Our shoes can last so long. That's part of the equation and why they love us. And we would just love to give them the tools to share that with others and hopefully have a longer conversation with them.
Wonderful. Yes, there's so much to look forward to this year. And it's a very, it's a time of rapid change in digital. I'd love to hear from each of you which marketing surface, so like which channel or format are you most excited about marketing on this year?
I'm most excited about connected TV. because it, again, uncharted territory for us as a brand. And while the surface has been around for a while, the capabilities continue to evolve. You know, it's in a past life, I've bought media here, and really the audiences and the targeting, the measurement has evolved in a few years. So we're really excited about our video strategy and specifically this vehicle to deliver our amazing new content.
And producing video content is so fun. It's great that things are moving this way, because it's a really great opportunity to get creative.
Producing video is so fun.
Yeah.
I would say, and knowing that several potential partners may reach out and say, we've got just the tool for you. I was going back to the multi-sensory way that people experience the water, and so many brands would kill to have another sense involved. I think audio is a sort of next on the frontier for us to explore. It's nothing that's defined in our plans right now yet, but it's something that I think we need to be a part of, because I think it's such a part of the experience for us.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting how audio is evolving within other channels as well. You know, we never previously as marketers had to think about audio trends before. And now this is a factor when marketing on TikTok. So yeah, I love that you're bringing up the sensory experience. And certainly I feel like you have a lot to play with and work with your brand with that. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do a final call out to the audience to submit their questions for Sarah and Jim. We've got a couple more minutes here to go, but I do have a question for each of you. I'm sure as you've been going through this transition, you've been looking outward at other brands that have done this kind of a transition well. So can either of you point to a heritage brand that you really respect or appreciate the way that they have brought their brand forward into 2022, or it could even be a couple of years ago, but just like a great kind of brand revamp that you've seen?
I wonder if Jim and I will both pull from past lives, but I'm coming from Reebok, and I'm just, 8 years there and just so proud to see where the brand is right now. And I know all of the work and many, many years of shifting brand perception, working with the right partners, getting it right at wholesale. And they're, just on the verge of becoming even bigger. And yeah, so for me, it's Reebok, and just really proud of what the team's doing over there.
You get to do it all over again.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did do 12 years at New Balance, and they were transformational. I met my wife there. She's still there. So there are debates on do the kids wear New Balance sneakers or Sperry boots when they go out the door? Try to see who wins that battle. But I will say, for me, a brand that I look up to for a different reason is Subaru. And because to me, their brand purpose and sort of their cause initiatives reshaped their entire brand. I mean, they started working with the ASPCA as one of their charitable partners, and now there's dogs in spots, dog tested. It's just, they've brought that through the whole connection. If you go to their site, when you go buy a vehicle, we have one, and you're given the chance to donate to one of their charitable partners. So it goes from brand campaign all the way down to dealer level. Across the entire organization, their purpose carries them, and that's something that I really look up to and admire them for. And they've been building it now for 12 years.
Absolutely. And social responsibility is something that is growing in importance for consumers. Certainly, that's what we've seen in our research in the last few years as well. And certainly, we're encouraging our brands to take angles with social responsibility in mind. I'd love to hear, is that being incorporated into Sperry's plans for the year, and a little bit more about that?
That's a little bit about what Make Waves represents for us, which is sort of changing the dynamic of how again, as I was saying, what it means for someone to work at Sperry. I think it's powerful for the consumers. And again, you hit it around the head. They've said it's a non-starter. You have to care about something. You have to make the world a better place. Myself as a marketer, I don't want every conversation to end in a buy now button. Sometimes I want it to be about just the experience. So if we can act as an amplifier, a funder, if we can act as sort of de facto venture capital to get people out there, our brand purpose as we've defined it, if the consumer, and they do, and we all feel such a emotional connection, almost a spiritual connection to the water, then and we were born on the water. We have to protect it. We have to do better in our sustainable efforts, and we have to ensure that everyone has access to it. And if you think about the heritage of the brand, part that I would change a little bit if I could is sort of that 80s sort of prep school, very elitist part of the brand, and that's not what the water's all about. And so you'll be seeing us working this year to help fund and amplify organizations that are helping underserved communities have access to the water, that are helping people feel included and able to participate in whether it's water sports or just in general sort of getting to and being by the water. We think it's absolutely critical for us as a brand, but beyond growth as a brand and reinventing who we are, it's also part of employee retention and satisfaction. Do you work at a brand? Do you work for a place that actually cares about what's happening out in the world? When we raised that internally, it became a part of everyone's goals. It was immediately adopted and is now becoming sort of a final filter on the choices we make, investments, partnerships, et cetera. It's a final filter on how we do business.
You're creating the next legacy of Sperry. It's very exciting, and it's music to my ears. I'm a big proponent of water access and inclusivity there. That's also something that's really important to Generation Z, is this idea of inclusivity and, like we were talking about, social responsibility. So I'm sure that will also help you reach this new, demographic of consumers. So excited to see where this takes your brand as a journey, and both of you excited for the next steps. And everyone go check out the campaign. It's looking very fresh, definitely making some waves. Yeah, of course. And I think we're just about out of time here, but I want to thank you, Sarah and Jim, so much for taking the time to fill us all in on what's next for the brand.
Thanks for having us. And yeah, more to come. It keeps coming throughout the year. This is just the start.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. What a great way to kick off today's event. Really appreciate your time and hope to have you all back on our stage soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Bye.
one. Well, awesome. Super excited to launch into our next panel. We're going to be shifting gears into the CPG and beauty space with Karen Laker, the marketing director at Alita Beauty from Unilever. And moderating this panel is going to be Brian Spencer, the director of product marketing at Kroger Precision Marketing. So really excited to welcome Karen and Brian to the stage shortly. Hi there. How are you?
Good. Hi, Emily.
Hi. How's your day going so far?
I am just, it's really unfair to listen to that last session because I'm in a northern climate zone, and to be like in the middle of February talking about boats and water.
Being on the water. Yeah.
It's just cruel.
I know, it just makes you long for the summer to come. So we'll just have to count down the days till we can be out on the boat again.
Oh my goodness, that was a great session. I really enjoyed listening to that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it looks like Karen's on. Glad to have you both here. So I'll hand it over to you, Brian, to take it from here, and I'll pop back in towards the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thanks.
And hi, good to see you again.
Hey, Brian, I'm working on my virtual background. One moment.
No problem. Hey, there you go. All right.
There we go.
Karen, thanks so much for sitting down with us today. I'm going to start just with a little bit of introduction on myself and then pass it to you and let you introduce yourself to everyone. Jump into our conversation. I love this theme today about modernizing losing the legacy. I feel like, you know, nostalgia is kind of top of mind for everybody right now, coming out of Super Bowl weekend and that nostalgic halftime show that we had. Just a lot of fun things to think about in this space. Hey, I'm just way of introduction for everyone. I'm Brian Spencer, Product Marketing Director with Kroger Precision Marketing. Kroger Precision Marketing is the retail media business of Kroger. So our business is designed to help brands close that loop between media exposure and in-store sales. And we do that through a full media ecosystem of on-site and off-site media touchpoints. Happy to be here today with Karen Laker, who is Marketing Director at Alita Beauty. And Alita Beauty is a recent entity born out of Unilever. And Karen, I want to hear more about that, about you know, how Alita was created and what's happened in the past year. But before we go there, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself? Maybe a little bit of your background, your career path, your career journey, and how you got to be in this role of marketing director for this new division.
Yeah, sure. So I started at smaller company as a small consulting company, and then I was doing sort of a startup of startups, so new business ideas and bringing them to market. I went back to business school to learn more and get some of those basics under my belt. And then I found my way to Unilever as an intern and then full time. And I've been at Unilever now for 10 years across local, global brands and different categories. And prior to taking this role, I was leading Talenti marketing right after Talenti was acquired by Unilever. And so I joined Alita Beauty in July, and we're all a very new team, but it's a new business unit at Unilever, like you said, and it includes brands Q-Tips, Caress, Noxzema, Lever, TG Bedhead, and I look after the skincare brand, so Caress, Noxzema, and Lever 2000. And so I've had the experience with small companies and then some big ones, and both with Talenti and with this role, I feel like it's sort of both in a way, some of those like small brand and big brand elements.
That's awesome. So yeah, it sounds like you know, your career path at Unilever has really prepared you for this moment where you're in a position where you're bringing some old brands some new life, and in this position where Alita is coming into the market as a new kind of holding company brand. So is that the right way to kind of think of Alita? Is Alita itself is not a consumer-facing brand; it is a holding company of brands?
Yeah, we describe it as a business unit. So consumers won't see Alita Beauty; they'll see the brands themselves. But yeah, it's a business unit within Unilever.
Okay. I love these kinds of new business units. You know, where I sit within a grocery store chain that's 139 years old, and you know, I'm working in this retail media business that's just 4 years old, and so it feels very much like you know, some days you come to work and you feel like you're working in a startup. And depending on the project, some days you feel like, oh no, we actually are like this really big, old, established company. I imagine that it feels a little bit like that at Alita. Do you think of yourselves as like a startup culture, or like you know, you're just part of the Unilever culture?
You know, we're definitely trying to build our own culture, and it's great to have sort of the backbone of Unilever and the training and some of those fundamentals and processes. And then at the same time, really think about how we want to do things differently and picking those places to act differently, and have more of a startup mindset.
That's a lot of fun. It's fun to be like starting something new. in an organization like that, an organization that has a lot of resources and a lot of like great momentum, but to be in a role where you can be building out something new. Tell us about just Alida as a team, as a structure. Like, how are you guys? How do you kind of structure yourselves? How are you guys set up there? Realizing that this is still a fairly new entity. You said this was about 1 year ago that Alida was launched?
Yeah, about 1 year. Most of the marketing team started in the back half of last year. So it's still new, and we're still very much shaping it. I think, like, going back to that sort of startup mentality and how do we almost structure in a way that supports that. I think one is this idea of like no silos, and everyone as a business owner is just sort of a consistent value that we talk about in hiring, we talk about repeatedly. So it's really like that is a key thing of everyone as a business owner and having that holistic understanding. And then things in terms of the structure with certain teams kind of owning things end to end in terms of marketing, not breaking marketing up into different segments, and then also like connectedness across market research and sales and design, and sort of ensuring that the structure also supports that startup mentality ambition.
Yeah. So important within a new organization where you're trying to build that culture to make sure there's none of those silos, make sure that there's a lot of great collaboration, communication happening. Well, that sounds great. That sounds exciting. And you guys are looking to kind of build your own kind of subculture within the organization. I think that's really important too. We've certainly found the same thing here at Kroger, where it's like the Kroger mission is something that really resonates with everybody. So like we can hang on to that mission.
Mm-hmm.
Our team within the retail media group can like start to build some of just our own little ways of working, our own little kind of subculture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So Alida, your products are in the beauty aisle. Hey, the beauty aisle is a super competitive space. Can you just talk about like what are some of those advantages or disadvantages of working with some of these older brands, established brands in a really competitive aisle? Just bring us into like some of those discussions that you guys have about the beauty space and the challenges you face there.
Yeah. I mean, there are pros and cons of having these established brand names that maybe have lost a little relevance. I came from a brand on Talenti that was just focused on awareness. It was really growing smaller, had very, very low awareness. With these brands now, they have high awareness. People know Caress and Noxzema, but in a lot of cases, they have memories of campaigns from the 90s or before, and that's what they remember. And so there hasn't been that much energy behind the brands in recent years. So people have memories from decades ago. And so, I mean, it's such an advantage to have high awareness as a brand, to be a household name. But we have to work at evolving the memory structures to a new place for today's consumer.
Yeah, it's neat. So many brands would love to be in that position of already having, an established kind of baseline of awareness. But like you said, it can work against you if you feel like the established perception is not where you want it to be as a brand. So how do you, when you think about like how you might need to change perceptions, how are you tapping into that perception and where it stands right now? How are you tapping into like, what is the next generation of beauty buyers? Like, what are they looking for and so on? How do you just kind of keep a pulse on that?
Yeah, I think one is sort of, well, deep consumer work. So talking to your consumers again, that's like a basic of marketing, right? But
Right.
that's where you have to start. Who loves the product today? Who loves the brand and who doesn't? And that really gives some good nuggets on where you can go. So that like basic fundamental of talking to people is always a good practice. And then I think, you know, one is meeting people where they are. So the next generation of beauty product buyers, not just saying like Gen Z, because we're not focused on that generation necessarily for these brands, but just like today's beauty buyer, like meeting them where they are in terms of where's the conversation happening, what channels are they present in, where's their beauty conversation happening now. That's been a really important, valuable thing for us. Um, and then understanding sort of what they're looking for in a brand today. What are the relevant product attributes as sort of table stakes for brands today, and making sure you're delivering on those. And then from there, you can build. But I think understanding like where people are and being there a little bit more, and then what are sort of the things that products in these categories have to deliver on.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, tapping into that mindset, understanding those needs that they have today. I mean, have there been any big kind of pillars that you're landing on? Or I suppose it's maybe different for each product in your portfolio, but anything kind of stand out when you think of how people are buying in the category today, even compared to maybe just a few years ago, right? Like we've seen that just across a number of categories that people are buying. Needs have shifted, right? Like we're in a slightly different world than we were 3 years ago. I mean, have you seen any kind of particular needs or product attributes kind of rise to the top on people's list of concerns or interests?
Yeah, it varies a bit by category, but I think what's really important with these heritage brands is understanding where they come from and like building from there. So Caress delivers a pretty sensorial, immersive experience. It's pretty complex scents, soft skin feel, affordable price. And that's been true since it was founded. It's still true today, but it needs to come to life in a more relevant way. And so then we look at the channels we tell the story, the packaging, sort of across the six P's of marketing. Yeah, so I think that's sort of a recent one. On Noxema's tried and true. Generations have been using it, passing it down. Right now, we're having such a moment of 90s nostalgia, like you were saying at the beginning, and people are looking for sort of retro products in a way. And so I think that's an interesting thing too, of like being grounded in what makes the brand, and sort of then defining what elements to modernize, without straying too far from what you actually are.
I love that. And yeah, I'm in the age category now where like all the stuff from the 80s and 90s that's coming back, I love it, but I'm also like slightly bothered, like, oh, this is nostalgic now for people. But I get it. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah, when you think about kind of remixing older brands, and so I love pulling forward some of that nostalgia that people have, and just some of those brand truths that are still really foundational for the future. Are there new brand qualities that people are looking for, and how do you think about like trying to inject new kind of brand qualities into the product portfolio as you go forward?
Yeah, so like a pretty basic example is you see so many more, and I hate to even say clean label, but there's so many more claims around sulfate free, paraben free, testing, whatever, those safety claims. And in some cases, they're important to give some reassurance to consumers. And so I think that's certainly that's certainly a trend to be aware of, and then to think about how we adapt it for our brands where it does or doesn't make sense. But I also think about, so Bob Iger once said about Disney that, you know, they are creating stories about princesses, and that's okay. The princess today is very different than the princess 10 years ago. Like Elsa's different from Cinderella, but they're still in the business of stories about princesses. And so that's just kind of, you know, we're in the business of sensorial soaps for Crest, of really efficacy in terms of cleanser for Noxema. And so the surrounding elements of that, whether it's like, again, the clean claims or how we communicate, those are the different levers then that we can play with to bring that brand promise to life. But let's keep doing what we're like, why we're a heritage brand to begin with.
Yeah. So it's the same brand you love, same mission, same results, but yeah, a few updated for today's needs, updated for today's audiences. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about how you get that message out to consumers, and I know, you know, your team is still kind of formulating, like Alita and your product portfolio, your new entity within Unilever. And so maybe like media benchmarks are still kind of like are being formulated. But can you talk a little bit about media touch points, and, you know, what are those what are those touch points that are just coming to the surface right now when you think about reaching the current generation of beauty buyers?
Yeah. I think we did a social audit strategy refresh last year, and, you know, there's so much beauty conversation happening on Instagram and TikTok. Those are just really powerful channels for beauty. And if you're not there, you don't have control over the narrative and what's happening. So we kind of identified those platforms early as channels for us where we needed to revive our presence a little bit more. And I would say, you know, our brands are also, we don't spend a ton of money. We're not doing like massive TV relaunch. That's another way to modernize a brand or communicate. But we're more focused on, again, in beauty, because there's these existing channels where there's so much conversation. How can we have more presence there and kind of be more relevant by at least being in those conversations?
So, so you look at for the beauty aisle today, social is, would you call it like the foundational piece of your media strategy right now, or?
Yeah, digital and social. I think it's interesting because like 10 years ago, it was all about followers. So followers on Facebook, getting to 100,000 or 200,000. And then there was an era of like organic social is not worth it. Don't spend money on developing assets for organic social. And now I think our understanding of it is just different, where we have a whole digital ecosystem. It's your paid, of course, and your owned channels as well, and earned. But so your website, your social channels, your email, all of that is important to have presence. And it's not like you're investing there to get awareness on an Instagram post necessarily, but you're having at least a unified brand image and a little bit more like responsiveness and relevance in sort of this holistic digital ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. So, so it's not just about like paid touch points anymore. It's not just about like building up followers, just being a part of that conversation. Can you maybe double click on that a little bit in terms of just how some of your products are participating in that conversation? You know, obviously, you know, beauty products are being talked about every day in social now. It does seem to be like a hot content category and a hot channel for the beauty aisle. Is it about tapping into influencers? Is it about like just seeing how your consumers are using the product and just kind of having a conversation with them? Like, what is it
Mhm.
like to have that as sort of a foundational piece of your strategy?
Yeah. Well, I should say not much is live yet, so don't go to our like social channels and wonder what's going on yet. Um,
Fair.
but I think so. So one example is on Noxema. We found that there were sort of um, there was some negative content on Noxema, and we saw that actually people came and like defended the brand so strongly on their own. We didn't even do anything, but us having more like dedicated resources listening for those conversations, we can one be part of it, like have our own voice there, control the narrative a little bit more, and not just rely. It's great that people self-manage and defend us, but we can be there a little bit more intentionally too. Um, and then I think in terms of like the content that we push, it's we've tried to be more intentional about that type of content. So not just an influencer like holding a bottle, but how to use the product, tying into other interests or categories. I think that's more of the stuff that you'll start to see where hopefully it's more engaging, useful content and not just sort of product promotion, which wasn't getting much anyway.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah, can't wait to see what you guys do in this space. And I love that you have a consumer base that's already passionate and already defending you in social space. I mean, there's no better, right? Like there's no better message than having your consumers kind of speak up on their own. So that's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to see.
Um, uh, Can you talk a little bit about just your plans moving forward, and when you think about kind of remixing these legacy brands for the future, like what does success look like? How do you think you'll know that a message is resonating with sort of today's beauty buyers?
Um, sales. There's so many things. I think, you know, with with heritage brands or legacy brands, I think you're often looking at where are the pockets, where is there some traction. So is it like certain cohorts of consumers or certain customers, or like let's find the green shoots wherever they are, um, and make them bigger and extend that. And so right now we're really pretty granular with what's our performance with certain retailers and how are we doing there. Then of course we look at penetration by cohort, brand equity with by cohort, again, to of course we care about the total picture, but especially at this stage we need to you know ensure at least with certain segments we're gaining that traction and moving in the right direction with building our relevance.
That's great. And it's so exciting, I think, to be in a role like what you're in now. You're just going to be able to establish those benchmarks moving forward and just see how your plans are winning year over year with these sort of relaunches. It's very cool. Can you talk about the role of retailers in brand modernization? How do you guys think about, obviously you're doing so much on the brand side, what can your retail partners do in terms of helping to modernize some of these legacy brands?
Yeah, I mean that the physical availability is the most critical thing. It has to be visible on the shelf and there. And I think right now it's sort of a two-way thing of we need to give customers, retailers, the confidence that we're supporting these brands in a different way. We're approaching it differently, and to give them the confidence that we're going to be successful and grow them And then hopefully that in return earns us better shelf placement and better presence in store. But I think we're really focused on that. We're going back to sort of our structure and some of those things we've been doing differently. The closeness of the team across sales and marketing is different because it's such a critical thing to make sure our physical presence, our in-store presence is there, and e-com as well, as such an important platform now. So really important. I think the first step is us building some of that confidence that we're on this journey and we're making progress and there's reason to believe in these brands again.
Yeah. Partnering with those retail customers is always important, and especially making sure they understand that you're remixing these and modernizing these brands. That's cool, and I think, like you said, it can go both ways. Full disclosure. Again, I sit within the retail media and data business unit of Kroger. But what we have found is that we as a retailer also have just a lot of great data that brands can use to just help understand who's buying the brands right now. What do these households look like? What else is in the basket? And retailers have this relationship with, in the case of Kroger, we have a relationship with 60 million households coast to coast. And so it's like, hey, how can we help all of our brand partners understand which of these households might be lapsed households, which households, based on their total purchase history, based on our longitudinal kind of view of what these households have been buying over time, which households might really be attracted to seeing these brands modernize. And kind of a little bit of that back and forth between retailers and brands is just so important. This modernization space.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting on a brand like Crest, for example. Crest has real strength with the Hispanic audience, and we hear from some customers that they want brands that help them better serve that cohort too. And so again, that like give and take and the marriage of insights from both sides, I think can help improve the shelf presence and ultimately the success of the brand.
A win-win-win, right? Win for the consumers, win for the brand and the retailer. It's all good. Cool. Can you talk a little bit about just again, thinking of how people shop today, like how are you guys thinking about e-commerce, direct to consumer, just new ways that people are shopping today? And how do these new shopping habits impact, how you think about modernizing these brands?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what's really important about e-commerce is it's where people are buying, but it's also part of that digital ecosystem. So right now, our top priority is how do our brands show up? What's the content on sites? And it's very variable right now. We have different logos on different retailer sites. And so having that like uniformity of content and best in class content is really important, not just to get the sale on e-com, but also again, how your brand shows up and that sort of consistency. And then, breaking down the world of e-commerce, we're focused. So content is top priority. Then we're more focused on click and collect for our brands. They're lower price point brands. It's challenging to ship them and make the economics of that work out without sending people a lot of product. And so we're really focused on winning at click and collect as sort of a near-term priority, but then certainly we have to keep figuring it out how we're going to get more of that growing behavior really as people are buying more online. But still, as we get there, again, this focus on content, I do think is really important.
Yeah, I think You're absolutely right. Like having that consistency of message all the way down to the digital shelf is so important because yeah, consumers don't, they expect seamless shopping these days, right? So they want to go from, watching the video, seeing the great content out there in social, right into just a commerce experience. And so having that consistency so that they know that they're buying exactly what they saw is so important. And it should feel, like a continuous seamless experience to them. And yeah, click and collect, pick up shopping, I think is really like, it has remained the, not the untold story, but sort of the downplayed story of the last few years. People have talked about the growth of e-commerce, and delivery is huge, but pickup shopping is ginormous.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's huge for our customer base, and and I can see why for your products, you'd want to really emphasize pickup, and I think it's a slightly different kind of tactics that you need to think about, because it is, like you said, like an add-on product. Somebody might be adding into their basket, so there's a lot of great tactics you can be thinking about there. Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about, just Alita Beauty as you're just thinking about, again, it's your team is just about a year old. You're looking ahead, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. How do you see your team evolving? And, are you still going to be kind of a startup company in a few years, or what's in the future for you guys?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we're so in the thick of it now with building, but I think we're really there's so much energy now because we're trying to build something new, and we want to show that these heritage brands can make a comeback. And so I think each of the brands in the portfolio is in a different stage, but to see the traction, I hope surely in 3 years we have some progress on that, and we see some of our brands with returned relevance in today's market. And I think so important is that within that is the processes we're building as in terms of how we function, and the team we have, and have that be a different model too, where we have, again, some of the great structure and fundamentals, but then also a new mindset, and how we're able to marry sort of the best of both worlds, hopefully.
Yeah, it's going to be so exciting to keep an eye on you guys and see what these brands look like a year from today and down the road. Karen, coming out of Unilever and your career path, you said over 10 years at Unilever. Are there other brands in the Unilever portfolio that you've been maybe looking at for inspiration? Other brands that have been through a refresh or that have been through a modernization, where you feel like, oh, we might be able to kind of keep an eye on their playbook, or even just that's an end result that we'd love to see within your portfolio.
I mean, we're looking more broadly at not just Unilever portfolio, but what are other brands doing that have made a comeback or are trying to make a comeback. I thought that, I don't know if you've seen the Folgers ad. It's like a long form video, but that was so interesting. A very different approach, but really cool. And I was super inspired by it. So that won't be the model we take for our brands, but I think we're always looking at outside category inspiration from smaller brands and bigger brands and heritage brands and modern day brands to kind of adapt what's going to work best for this mix of brands we have.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's exciting again to kind of see some of the nostalgia for some of these older brands right now. And yeah, certainly on the Kroger side, again, our brand has been around for 139 years. And so, we've been thinking a lot about, what our brand means to shoppers today. And we went through a big brand refresh a couple of years ago. And we're now sitting on our new tagline, fresh for everyone. And, I love it because it's like, it kind of anchors on food, right? And people associate Kroger with grocery and with food. But fresh for everyone can also mean a lot more than that, and it can be applied to skincare, right? My beauty routine has been refreshed. So we've been through a little bit of this journey of refreshing a legacy brand, and it's really energized our consumer base, our shopper base, and our associates too. It's exciting to see just internally people get re-energized and excited about our own brand. So I think that's something you guys will be able to look forward to as well.
Yeah, that's great.
When you think about just other teams out there that might be watching today, where they've got some classic brands that they're thinking about remixing or refreshing for today, like, are there any kind of just in the past year with this journey you've been on, any just little pieces of advice, any little nuggets you'd want to leave people with?
Yeah, I think I would say two things. One is embrace the heritage and understand that, and then move from there. Then pick your levers, but like embrace what you are. And then the second thing is what I was also saying before, like look for the green shoots, look for where there are the pockets of success, because you need them to understand what's working in market, and you also need them to motivate your team and show something is working and we can build from here. And that's equally important, honestly, to show that there's some success. So embrace the heritage and look for the green shoots.
I love that. Looking for those green shoots, those little moments of success, those little things you can point to. And I do want to ask the audience if there are any questions out there. We're happy to take questions. And I see Emily's back on, so we probably need to wrap it up. But Karen, any other kind of final thoughts here about where you guys are headed, or anything else you want to share about what Alita has been up to?
I think we covered a lot of the main things. I guess the one thing I didn't talk about was purpose, and how today's consumers are looking for brands to stand for more. So we talked a little bit about like brand attributes, and even more so now it's going beyond that to your brand's take on culture and the world and purpose. And that can get so conflated and be disconnected from the brand. But it's something, again, we start with looking at our roots and our heritage and where we came from. And then like, what role do we have to play in terms of having a bigger impact on the world as well? So, but
I think that's what's great about heritage brands is like, you've already got some credentials, right? Like you've stood the test of time, and it's clear what you stand for. But it's nice in this opportunity where you have in this position where you have the opportunity to sort of remix and refresh these brands as well. Karen, thank you so much. This has just been, I've learned a lot, and it's so great just hearing what you guys are up to with refreshing some of these classic brands. And yeah, thanks for all of the tips and advice.
Yeah, thank you. Super fun to talk.
Yeah. Emily, back to you.
Oh, you're muted.
Emily.
I'm on mute. Oh my gosh. I'm a rookie. Oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. I was saying thank you both so much. So appreciate having you here and all the great insights. I think that was such a great note to end on, and capitalizing on all of the amazing history and emotional nostalgia that people feel when they think of Unilever, but tapping into kind of that new way to bring a brand into the world. So thank you so much, Karen, and thanks, Brian, as always, for joining us.
Thanks.
Have a
Bye,
good one.
thanks.
Well, we're excited to head into our next panel, where we're going to be hearing from Rachel Henke, the Senior Director for Brand and B2B Campaigns at Dell Technologies. And moderating this panel will be Jonathan Troughton, the CEO of FramePlay. So excited to have both of them joining us and hear about what is up with Dell. Hi, how are you?
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Rachel. How's it going?
It's going well.
Good, good. Glad to have you guys both here. Excited to hear what you guys have in store for the conversation. Super exciting topic. So we'll let you guys kind of take it from here.
Wonderful.
Thank
Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Rachel. I dare say you're going to be more energetic than me as I'm bouncing all over Europe at the moment. So
Oh my.
I'm stuck in a little box, but I'm actually really excited to jump on here because obviously talking about legacy in brands and how you modernize them and really bring them forward in the modern day and how you make it actually authentic and applicable. I mean, Dell's a name we all, and Dell Technologies is a name we all know. Like, what does that mean? Yeah, that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Dell Technologies, but that's a brand it's been around. We all know this. So I think I'm going to jump right into it and just sort of ask, like, what is Dell Technologies' legacy, and how do you evaluate opportunities to promote your products that are also authentic to this legacy?
Okay, that's a big question, so I'm going to unpack it a bit. One thing I am going to start is just by giving everyone a bit of context, and because Dell is likely not what you think Dell is today. So a lot of times when you hear the word Dell, you think, dude, you're getting a Dell, for those who are probably, came of age in the early 2000s, or you think of a computer, a laptop. And what we're trying to do is really do this yes and conversation about our brand. So about 6 years ago, Dell and EMC merged. It was actually the largest technology merger in history. So, you can write that up. But one of the things that really became special about that, when we merged, we had to make this decision of how do we show up. Having EMC come along, that came along with VMware and a lot of other brands that really put us solidly in that B2B technology space. And we had to think, do we go to market as Dell? Do we go to market as Dell EMC? Do we go to market as something completely new? So we really took a step back and really tried to think about, what do we want to lean into with the legacy of both of our brands, and what makes sense of how we bring that into the future. And what came out of that was a new name for our company called Dell Technologies, really leaning into that legacy of computer technology, which we are still very active in that category, but almost adding that technologies had that, like, wait a minute, what is that technologies? So really, Dell Technologies was birthed, if you will, about 6 years ago. And it's been my job, along with a team, to really bring about that shift in perception of Dell does laptops and computers, but we do so much more now. We are active in storage, servers, of course, cloud, and not a lot of people know about that yet. So, one of the things that we're leaning into is, how do we talk about a brand that carries a huge legacy and expand that from a perception, as well as how to drive those sales as well.
There's something a common vein that I'm hearing here is, like, how do you show up? And for those who are familiar with me, usually going on some sort of rant about being authentic in gaming, like, I guess they expect that from me. But back to that, like, being authentic and how you show up, what are some of the ways that Dell Technologies has modernized its brand in recent years?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we had to really make an intentional effort to show up differently to our customers. And so For those who are, geeky ad watchers and marketers like me, you may have seen some of our TV spots that we actually threw out digitally as well, featuring celebrity. We brought in Jeffrey Wright to be our pitch person of sorts to really grab attention to what we're doing and really explain who we are. We felt that was a big move to doing that. And so we really looked at a couple different things, for this. One is where's that big splash in being able to change those broad perceptions that we really need to push in the marketplace, and then also where do we show up with the smaller audiences, with the decision makers, with influencers, in how we start to look at some of those micro audiences and really start to do some of that conversion, lead generation. And so we've showed up both in that broad linear, if you will, fashion, but also looking at digital and new platforms to say, how do we show up differently to different audiences where we want to appeal to them in different ways? Because we sell a lot these days.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're doing that, how do you measure the scale and impact that Dell Technologies is having in this modernization efforts? What kind of metrics are you valuing? Because obviously, I usually go on down the realm of like the vast data that's available in gaming. I mean, how do you guys looking at this?
It's hard. Any brand marketer will tell you, if you have the secret recipe to crack the code for how to measure brand marketing, like pass that to me. So there is a lot of research out there that does show having a strong brand, allows you to, control your pricing. It allows you to, get a seat at the table. It allows you to open those doors. Now, how you measure that is a big question. So we've done a lot of research in looking at when we're advertising, for example, does our overall web traffic increase? So that's one way. But then we also do a lot of research. And so one area that we do looking at that perception shifting research is campaign impact. So we will go into the market 2 or 3 times a year and really understand who is seeing our ads, and we really look at that B2B target audience, and then who isn't seeing our ads, and trying to figure out kind of like why, what is that general awareness percentage. And then we look at, of those who are aware of our campaign, what do they think of us? Those who aren't aware of our campaign, what do they think of us? And we found some very interesting data that those who are aware of our brand campaign have said that they've seen it, actually think of us as a more innovative company. They think of us as a technology thought leader, like double-digit percentages higher than those who haven't seen our campaign. So that's really enabled us to show that these perception driving activities are working in doing that. Now, what does a stronger perception do for your brand? It allows for a higher conversion rate for your lead gen. So when we look at lead gen, we're looking at things like high value engagement. Are they engaging with our content? And then is there some of that halo lead to a stronger pipeline, to stronger conversion rates? And so it's harder to do that correlation with those demand driving activities. But when you speak to the demand gen team, they are actually adamant about, we need this brand campaign in order to help us convert stronger. So we know there's something there, but it is hard to really make that hard line.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of different strategies you can take about how you actually get there. I mean, we use ComScore, for instance, and we do a ton of brand lift measurement studies and haven't got that. And to your point, we see massive double-digit lifts all the time. And it's funny you said engaged. That's something we always look at. Like when someone is playing a game, this could be Dell Technologies, a decision maker in some sort of level, but it could be reaching them in their environment where they want to be in a way that doesn't break their experience. And when you start talking about how you actually engage with people, how you're showing up, I mean, this is all really important, because for us, we've been breaking this common misconception that gamers are kids, but a gamer is probably someone in your exact target audience that you're actually going for.
I actually give you like a yes and to that conversation, because it is really relevant to what we're looking at, because we always are looking at where should we be showing up, how do we show up, and then how do we show up within context, right? That's the big challenge. And
being authentic. God, like that's something we always push in.
Boom. And so one of the challenges, that we've really looked and challenged our media company to be like, hey, bring us ideas, is really doing some native partnerships. And so we've worked with big publishers, like Business Insider, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, for example, that's just a few, and really figuring out how do we use some of their first party data to target their audiences in a contextual way, doing content together, really having them guide us on how to show up within their platforms. And I think a lot of that best practices, if you will, can start to show up in that gaming atmosphere, which is, okay, if we want to show up in gaming, first of all, you have to educate me on, do you have the right audience within gamers? And we do know that, those tech people, they play games. So it's an interesting if this, then that.
Well, everyone plays games now.
Yeah,
That's
everyone
the thing,
does these
like,
days.
yeah.
My kids play games, and so we are trying to figure out, how do we thoughtfully show up? The publishers have had that cracked because they can bring in their editorial teams and say, hey, we can create this content together. And so with that gaming, how do we start to show up in a way that is authentic, that does represent what people are doing without disrupting what they're doing? How can we add value within that space?
Oh my God, now you sound like you work for us here. Don't disrupt the play, be authentic. That is like core philosophy. You said something back there around like the data, like the first party data.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is like a beaten horse, but there's a lot of changes coming to data, and I know this topic, like IDFA, AT&T, this like demise of cookies is going to have a much bigger impact on the industry than I think most people are willing to admit. I think a lot of people have talked about being ready. Whether they're actually ready, that's a different thing altogether. Where do you see Dell Technologies in that sort of placement? Where are they seeing opportunities here as well? Because I mean, this landscape shifting and we're changing the status quo isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just we need to be looking at how to do it, how to be proactive.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you've asked the question that we're all asking ourselves too. And there are many ways to get ready for it, but are we actually ready? Hey, we're about to find out. But I think to your point, it does become this opportunity to get tighter with platforms and trusted partners where you can show up in a safe way, in a way that adds value, and in a way that targets your audience. So with cookies going away, we are relying on some of our partners like Google, Adobe Analytics. They're starting to crack the code of like, where are those rich places where we can show up still after this happens. But then, there's also, it is going to be a challenge because we can't necessarily, follow people. That seems like an engaged customer. But we do know that they visit these different platforms. So how do we show up better in the platforms where they know they are, and then take some big bets on where we think they are?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we knew going into gaming that this world is slightly different as well. And we wanted to have all the measurements and I guess you would say the requirements that you as a brand or an advertiser requires to effectively search for ROI. How do you do that in a privacy compliant way? I mean, this is going to be really interesting watching this go forward, and especially like I know this will probably come up later on in the conversation. I don't want to touch on it. It's like even when people talk about metaverse, like what does that mean? How are you brand safe? How are you going to be able to actually attribute and measure these things? So like, maybe we'll circle back to that, but I think when we start looking at privacy and changes to that cookie sort of place, FramePlay and our entire ecosystem was built in this construct that these would never exist and that we needed to have different solutions. I'm always happy to hear that Dell Technologies and others are starting to realize and actually lean into the concept. We're going to have to do things differently. We're going to have to understand there's going to be change. That's awesome.
No, I agree with that. And, like I said, we've been having a lot of conversations with our media partners of how do we do that? Because we can't just all of a sudden, like when the day comes, all of a sudden be like, what do we do now? So we're starting to lean into how we're going to be preparing for that and even trying to be proactive with it as well.
Yeah. So how does Dell Technologies maintain authenticity in the communities you market to now? Like, I mean, there's a lot changing. So how are you remaining authentic?
Ooh, I mean, well, I mean, first of all, it comes with knowing who we are, having some self-awareness. And, we work really hard to we have a globalized, centralized strategy and creative team. And so that really is kind of the core of how we start to make sure we're understanding what is that authenticity. We do a lot of research, but then we really have to look at that global to local scale too, of
Yeah.
how do you do that in an authentic way. We spend a lot of time with our global organizations, and anyone who works in global marketing means that you meet really early and really late at night to really figure out how does this translate in Japan? How does this translate in parts of Europe? When do we lead with English? When do we lead with different languages? And then when do we adjust the talent? And so, but we strongly feel like having a strong creative platform, which we have a very strong creative architecture, and really understanding what's that box to play in that still doesn't put handcuffs on people so they still can't be creative, but really making sure that we're scaling in the right way. So we keep track of that, but I would say it's a challenge to do that for any global brand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also keeping context in mind. I know this is going to be massive for everybody, but somebody that's the company the size of Dell Technologies, context relevant to the actual audience is extremely important. I mean, it's the same philosophy we have when we go to gaming. Is context is almost king. How are you showing up? Is the creative appropriate, and is the context right?
Yeah, the other thing that we're really doing too is really leaning into storytelling and training our marketers to be good storytellers, no matter where they sit in the organization. So we've really looked at how do we tell our story in 6-second, 15-second, 30-second, whatever that story is. How do we do that in the most effective way? And then how do we train people to do that once, they need to do that for their local markets too? And so storytelling is that is the art that will never go away from marketing that we always need to keep in mind. And that is so important, how you show up. You can do the best storytelling in the world, but if you're showing up in a random site and the audience doesn't know who you are, it's all for naught. So it's really telling that right story and making sure it shows up in the right place as well.
Yeah. I mean, that hits a chord for us because in games, I mean, the whole thing there is people are choosing to be there and they're being part of the story being told. So how you're turning up is, extremely important. It's exactly why we don't want to break that experience for them, yet still be able to tell a contextually relevant story and creative that's appropriate to the environment they're jumping into. I guess, Frameplay is a global ad tech startup, and we specialize in intrinsic in-game advertising. So what kind of advice would you give a startup to ensure that they are authentically building their legacy?
Well, I'd say from a brand marketer, the first thing I'm looking out for is my brand. So we'd have to make sure that you're educating us a little bit, because this is still a pretty new space, and almost like educating our media partners as well, so they can educate us too. Because I'd say a lot of times if we get direct people, we redirect them to our media agency, because we really want to get that honest assessment. And so understanding what is that opportunity there, and then how can we feel safe showing up? I'd say one of the funny story about cookies is, we'll often get emails from people saying like, why is your brand showing up on this really bad site? And we're like, actually, why are you on that site? Because the cookies followed you there. But with this cookie
that would be an
listing,
interesting story.
Oh my gosh.
That would be some
Trust
interesting
me.
stories.
People have found us on really bad sites that you can't blacklist everything because, and so we've been like, well, actually you're on that site. So we just need to stop our cookies. But I think first of all, it's brand safety. How can we feel comfortable showing up in this space? And then the other thing is show us the data. I know I work in B2B, but I also know, because I've seen the data, that B2B influencers are gamers. So how do we take, how do we take those two things and make something interesting for our brand so we can show up in both a contextual way, but that's also safe, that I won't be getting pinged from some executive to say, hey, why are we showing up here? So it's really making sure that you show up as an opportunity, that you have the audience and that you have the ideas of how we can show up in a way that will be beneficial to our brand. And maybe we can even add some value to that experience as well. How can we make it fun?
Yeah. Well, so what is Dell Technologies' take on the gaming channel? Being that it's interesting because Dell Technologies also builds gaming
Yeah.
peripherals, hardware. So it's it'd be interesting to see your take on this, given that you are in the space in a major way, but then also not on the other side.
Yeah, well, so one thing that we don't really advertise too much together is that Alienware is actually a Dell Technologies brand. And we also do have a G series, which is our form of gaming. However, in the B2B space, we don't necessarily bring those two things together.
Yeah.
However, knowing that B2B influencers are gamers, if you go to Dell Technologies World, for example, which is our big premier global event, there's actually like a gaming setup where we do live gaming. And it's one of the most popular experiences at Dell Technologies World. And it's just basically gaming the whole time. Someone's talking through the gaming experience. And so we do know that there's something there. But I'm actually curious, and we talk about it a lot, how do we as a B2B brand show up in that space in an authentic way? And I think maybe we've done some, let's just say, some targeting, and we weren't really sure where it's going. I haven't seen that the data is there yet to do an experience. So it'd be interesting to see, how do we step into that and do a pilot. So if we're going to do a pilot, how would someone make us feel comfortable about trying that pilot? Maybe you'd be really transparent of like, hey, because we're trying this and we're both going to try and learn from each other, how do we do this together in a way that's cost effective for both of us? And if it works wildly, hey, if it's a high value engagement to us, I'm willing to pay for that, knowing that we're going to get something in return down the road.
I mean, at the end of the day, it still comes back to ROI for you guys, and ROI doesn't necessarily mean a one-to-one buy on a store. It can also be brand lift or whatever other KPIs that you're looking for. So, I mean, what advice would you give to media buyers looking to buy into the gaming space? Because we speak specifically to Intrinsic. Obviously, we are part of the game, and we want to give a really authentic experience. How would you give recommendation on that for media buyers?
So I'm just trying to understand the question, which is, are you saying like, what advice would I give to you to like kind of pitch to me if you were?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, from I guess you'd say a media buyer, like if you are going to look at the gaming space, hearing what is valuable to Dell, for an ROI perspective, you did mention there, like doing cost-effective tests. I mean, for this experience, it's a lean-in experience. It's premium. The reach, the data, like to your point, like backing it up with data. Am I reaching the person I want to reach? All of that is available at scale in intrinsic advertising in games. So, outside of that, what other things would you sort of look for or use as advice for buyers?
Yeah, well, and I think we talked about this a lot, which is all the context, which is showing us how we can participate in this, because this is a new territory for us. So, a part of me is like, what would that even look like? Are we just going to be an ad that shows up in the corner of the screen? Are we going to be a billboard within an experience? I don't know. And so, really helping us understand how we could show up in a contextual way would go a long way to getting us to consider it. Most good marketers, they, myself included, let's just say that, I do have an innovation bucket where we try new things. And as long as I feel like, we're not going to be damaging our brand, or there's not that big risk out there, this would be something really interesting to try. And so how can you present it to our media buyers that has the data, that has, this is the audience you want to target, and here's how you can do it. And so I think really being able to be clear on, knowing that there's an audience here and there's an opportunity, that's where we'd like to really figure out, should our brand try that and see if it works.
Well, I guess it comes back down to that measurement component.
Always.
Because
it does.
at the end of the day, you need to be able to measure what happened, how did it happen, who did we actually reach in the end of the day.
Yeah, and I know a lot of publisher partners, they do a lot of surveys within their platforms. I kind of look at those with a grain of salt, because typically if they're going to be doing it within their platform, hey, I get it. But, it is something to consider too, which is, after an experience, are they willing to answer one question? Like, did you see this ad? What did you think about it? I don't know if that would even be appropriate to do, but I will say, as a marketer and really as media, we're looking to get as much as we can out of it. And so, we will push those limits, we will ask those questions, we will try and do it. And I think it's up to these platforms to set those standards, set those boundaries, and really recommending to us, show up like this, not like that. And and really making sure that you're sticking to that, because if you start to get too many advertisers in there, you're going to look like a race car, and you don't want that for the experience anyway. You're going to start to lose your players. So how do you help us show up in ways that are authentic, that still keeps the core gamer happy and in playing as well?
I guess this goes full circle, keeping true to your legacy. For us, that's like keeping true to our pledge to be authentic to the experience of the player. How do we do that consistently and educate you as a brand to be present in there while having all of the measurement and everything you require in that? I mean, so this is an interesting one. I realize Dell Technologies definitely must be hearing this consistently, given that it's starting to pop up from at least a conversational point. The idea of Web3 or the metaverse or whatever it may be, like we probably get into an argument over that just alone.
Yeah.
How we're looking at this like gaming is the gateway to the metaverse. Basically, if you look at how the metaverse is built, it's basically built on constructs. We're going down this path of making sure that there's standards, there's making sure that it's brand safe, it's measurable, like all the expectations that you require. How do you think that's going to happen with the metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to hear that there is like brand safety. That's number one. I think when it's going to really start to take off is when there's scale. And so I think for a while it's going to be a little playground of so and so played in the metaverse, and it makes more of a headline than an impact within the actual experience. And that may be fun for a while, to capture some headlines, to play with it. But I think when it's really going to take off is when there is that scale. And fingers crossed, when we start to build the metaverse, that we're not making it so ad heavy that it becomes a turn off. So how,
oh my god, like
right?
You're speaking to my absolute dream here. I do not want to see it super ad heavy. But yeah, you're right. Like I mean, I think it's very much in its infancy. Gaming's been around for 40 years. It is very well established, massive audience, 3 billion plus audience. I mean, this is gaming's a channel that we should be definitely diving on. I'm not subtracting from the metaverse. Personally, I love the concept. But I think very much like we're building all the requirements now in gaming, and we're just getting, brands to actually recognize that value. I don't want to, jump too quickly ahead of things. I want to, crawl before we run, in effect.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the opportunity presents to us too, which is like, how can we establish an experience within gaming or within the metaverse that our potential customers could interact with. And we've done some things with like putting on the headset and taking a tour of data centers. So we have started to tiptoe into that, but it's definitely been more closed experiences versus connected. And so it's going to be an interesting way to tap into that.
Yeah, I think the way so we've looked at it as like, how can we build the enabling technologies for people to democratize these environments they want to go in? How can we build tools for them to monetize in a way that makes sense for the players? I think it's going to keep evolving. We're not going to really quite understand what form it's going to take. I just want to be, part of that journey. And I imagine you as a brand as well, looking at how do we be part of this journey to make sure it's a good experience. But I don't want to jump ahead too far when we have gaming right now in front of us, and that's effectively what it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that is the opportunity that we have right now that we know does have some scale. So what are those ways of being able to understand the audience within gaming, understand what are their interests, and then be able to show up in a relevant way? So I think it's like having to build on those ideas. And I think that's where brand marketers, I think there's some consumer brands who have really thrown some things out there really in a fun way. And so, I'm not sure if B2B has cracked that code yet, but, I think we should try, because we do know that it's there, but how well can you target within that experience? I think that becomes the question for us.
Yeah. Well, I agree. So on that, I guess I don't know how much time we have left. Brianna, how much time do we have left? Are we going to go to questions?
Trying to see if I can even see the questions here.
Yeah, usually they pop up on the side.
Okay, so there's one. What is something innovative you were introduced to from a marketing perspective that you're excited about?
Yeah, sorry, they didn't pop up there.
Yeah. And then how can brands remain relevant in the changing advertising landscape while still being authentic? I'm going to answer the second one first, because we talk a lot about how do we show up as authentic? How do we sincerely show up? That's almost like the next level of that. And, I think it comes down to knowing ourselves, knowing who we are and what we're known for right now, and then also knowing where we want to push. Do we want to push into innovation? Do we want to push into being progressive? Where do we want to go? And so I think knowing who you are and where you want to go really allows you to have that filter to make those decisions of where you want to show up and how you want to show up. So I'd say making sure you do that brand work in order to make those decisions easier.
Yeah, I mean to add on to that as well. I mean this whole landscape, when they're talking about here, the landscape is changing. How is the landscape changing? For a start, when people are actually asking that question, are they talking specifically about data privacy, or are they talking about media consumption or time? Where are people choosing to spend their time, I think is extremely important relative to how you show up. Because if they are choosing to spend their time on a website and they're there for a particular reason versus in a game or an app, I mean, that's going to change the dynamic of how you're authentically showing up. So knowing who you are, and this goes full circle back to legacy, like knowing who you are as a company and how you're showing up relevant to those people and being authentic. I mean, the landscape change is really going to be how they're actually engaging with it, because just as we were just touching on then with Web3, metaverse, ultimately we do want it to be Ready Player One. We want to be completely immersed in an environment. We don't, we're disconnected from everything else and we're completely in there. That's a long way off, but that experience is going to be very different to the one we see in front of us right now. And what was something innovative that you were introduced from a marketing perspective? I mean, obviously, what is something innovative you were introduced to from a marketing perspective that you're excited about? Rachel, obviously it's gaming.
Right. No, I mean, so I feel like I get a little overwhelmed by that question because there's so much. I feel like publishers bring us ideas all the time of how do we show up in a different way, in exciting ways. How do we show up in experiences, things that get us really excited? How do we show up in conversations? We're starting to plot out how we're going to show up for South by Southwest this year. And there's just a lot of exciting ideas that we have of how do we go outside our space and show up in an innovative way that makes people think differently about us. And so there's so many ideas out there. It's hard to pinpoint one, but I would say for us, it's really experiences that seem to really lean into that opportunity. And the big challenge is how do you show up authentically within those experiences? Is it as a sponsor? Is it, do you tie it to your technology somehow? How do you do that is where we start to push into, and how do we do it in the right way?
Yeah, definitely. Something I probably wanted to go circle back on there. Before, when we're talking about Dell Technologies and the perspective of having, after the EMC acquisition, etc., you mentioned around, I think I raised it, the gaming division. How is Dell thinking about the gaming division comparative to the other side, like the business, from the engagement? Is it still just are they the right audience? Are we in front of them in the correct way? Does our creative look good? Are we telling a good story? Or is there a different strategy for the gaming side of the business versus the business side of it?
It's a different strategy and intentional. We do know that our gaming brands need to show up to gamers in a different way than B2B needs to show up to a B2B audience. But we know that there's some crossover. So people wear many hats, and we're marketing to humans, so we keep that in mind. But if you look at the gamers, I mean, they're into avatars and, you know, blowing your mind experiences and how you can use our gaming technology to be a part of that. Whereas in B2B, you know, we have a much different, you know, path to go down, which is how do we, you know, enable businesses to thrive with a technology partner. And so with some of those decision makers, you know, how do we show up over here? But how we go to market is separate and intentionally different.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh,
but I will say one innovative way, and I should know this because it just launched today, that we've really been trying to push those limits is really looking at our customers and being inspired by them. One of our customers is a strong supporter of the MNDA, which is the Motor Neuron Disease Association. And so we worked with them, and he challenged us and said, hey, you know, how do we improve the lives of people who have been diagnosed? And so we kind of put our think tanks on, and we actually just decided to develop a book that captures your voice while you read it for people who have been diagnosed with MND. And so, you know, we're really looking to bring experiences with our technology to life that isn't all about, hey, buy now, click here, but really about showing how can technology change lives for the better, and really being a part of that conversation and a part of that progress. And so, you know, we've really been looking how we tell those stories versus buy now versus we're developing the technology that changes lives. You know, come partner with us. We're doing some great things.
so what would you say the top 3 takeaways for brands looking to modernize without losing their legacy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say, you know, first of all, like, know who you are, you know, have that research done, and, you know, be adamant about the data of, like, is your audience going to be there? You know, is this the right pool to fish in? And then, you know, the third is be open-minded of how you show up. And I think, you know, that's something that can be tough for brand marketers because we know ourselves so well. It's hard to put ourselves in different environments sometimes. But I think the right marketers know that we need to evolve in how we show up in authentic ways, and, you know, really be open to that new experience.
Awesome. I mean, I definitely top some on there from my own perspective. And this is specific to gaming because that is definitely my realm. But I think some key things that we're constantly breaking here is like knowing who our audience is in gaming. We have to keep re-educating this. Like, for some reason, you would think that this would have been dispelled, you know, 10 years ago, but it's still, the thought is that it's a 15-year-old boy in a basement, where the average age is 34 and female in the States, which is mind-blowing to most people.
Yeah.
The fact that you get all of the data and more that you would expect in gaming that's relevant to the rest of the marketing industry. I mean, again, this is why I think when you mentioned innovation budgets for a start, you should be looking at doing this for modernization to make sure your brand is present in these things, but just to be relevant, you know, going forward. Most of the next generation, they don't consume other forms of media. It is purely games. I mean, you're going to be irrelevant to them as they're going. Now, they might not be a customer right now, but it has to be thought of. So, yeah, is there any more questions that have come
my
through?
question to you is, like, because you're in this space too, you know, I'm more of, you know, being the one being pitched to. What has been your biggest challenge in getting this across the mark? Because I will say, I don't hear a lot of pitches to show up in the gaming space, but I do know my audience is there. So, you know, what are some of those hurdles that have been challenging? Is it education? Is it not having enough data right now? Like, what is that?
You know what? It actually is education. It's definitely, there's a couple of things, but I'll probably knock over a few and unpack that a little bit. But education is first and foremost a hurdle. Structures of media organizations and how people buy things, like, obviously you have to get into those different layers as you're going and make sure everybody's educated on understanding what it is. There's that old concept, like, you know, people are sort of thought in the past, where, like, you know, if I bought Facebook, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily applicable now, but you weren't going to get fired for doing that. all of this is changing. So they're being forced to change rather than, going through the educational process. I think, what the biggest hurdle for gaming was in the last couple of years is probably CTV, which is crazy because the whole, I guess, advertising world was sort of scrambling. I'm like, what's our focus on CTV? How are we activating? How are we showing up in CTV? The irony that you see there is that CTV has all of the data that gaming has, and people spend more time actually in a game than they are in CTV. But you're not folding laundry when you're playing a game. You are in full attention. You're actually inside the game, and you understand what's going on. If I'm watching something and something comes up on CTV, yeah, it could be on my phone playing a game. Ironic, because I see that in my own household, or you're doing something else. So it's funny that CTV being so comparable from a data perspective and being really not as good as an engagement perspective as gaming has been probably our biggest hurdle over the last couple of years. I mean, obviously, there's COVID, but everybody has heard that a million times, and everyone had to work around COVID just as CTV did. But comparatively, it would have been education and CTV, I would say. But now we have started to get to the point where brands are really understanding that the data that they were hoping is there, the audience is there, the engagement is far superior. It makes a lot of sense, but as we all know in this space,
well,
that change doesn't happen quick.
Too CTV, and I know Emily, you're here for a reason. I think that the CTV, it's like we can run our 30-second spot, we can run our 15-second spot. I think for us, that's like an easy space to move into. The data's there, the inventory is simple, we can understand it. I think for this is like the data's there, but how do we show up? And that could be that big question that we have to tackle.
And that is a bigger thing. So we have been really focusing on educating people. Please don't use the same piece of creative that you've put somewhere on the web. The creatives need to be way better because you're in an amazing environment that people have spent time building. Keep in mind, people are choosing to spend time in this environment playing a game. They didn't have to go on and check the timetable for the train or whatever else they're doing. They're choosing to be there. So, as a brand, they should be respecting how they're showing up in these environments that people are spending their time. It's in the States, it's 8 hours a week people are spending there. This is new time. You think of cost effective, like relative to all these other oversaturated channels that people are blind to. This is, gaming is the place to be.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. That was such a great way to end. And I know we could keep the conversation going longer. So love the chemistry on stage here, and hope to have you guys both back again soon to continue the dialogue. But really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks,
Rachel. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one. Well, what an awesome session there, getting to hear from Rachel and Jonathan. And we have a few more exciting sessions on the horizon. So stay tuned and continue to submit those questions for our upcoming panelists. So really excited to welcome our next speaker to the stage. We'll be hearing from Whitney Magnuson, the Senior Director for Social Marketing at Northwestern Mutual. And moderating this panel will be Amelia Goldie, the Senior Director of Client Development at Gen Video. Hi, Amelia. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us today. So glad to have you here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I think we're just waiting a minute for Whitney to join in, but where are you tuning in from today?
So I'm actually in DC currently, but I'm based in Florida, so I get to go back to the warmth shortly. Flying home later tonight.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, I'm originally from the DC area, so definitely understand that wanting to get back to your warm weather. I think we just need them to promote Whitney up to
I just heard you.
Speaker status there. So we'll just give her 1 or 2 minutes, but some really great panels earlier today. So excited to continue the dialogue right now. I think she just have to accept the promotion. Is this your first time speaking on our stage, or have you joined us for events before?
I have joined you all for some events before, but this will be my first official panel. I've done some roundtables before.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
definitely. Well, maybe we can give her a call. Oh, looks like we got her.
Hello.
Yay.
There we go.
Can you hear us, Whitney?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Well, at least we have your audio. Hopefully we can get your video up shortly, but glad we are able to get you on here. So excited to have you guys joining us to talk about, modernizing your brand without losing the legacy of, a great brand like Northwestern Mutual. So I'll hand it over to you, Amelia, to kind of kick things off, and hopefully we can get Whitney's video working shortly.
Sounds like a plan. Whitney, you can hear me, right?
I can hear you. Yeah, it's very odd. It's not giving me the option to turn on my video for some reason. But we can certainly get started, and hopefully we'll figure it out as we go.
That's good.
All good. I feel like with the past couple of years, we're used to technology just, working some days and not the others. So we will make it work. Well, Whitney, I know that we, have discussed it, but I would love for you to, share with the attendees a little bit about, I know your background is super unique and I find quite interesting. So I would love for you to introduce yourself, introduce a little bit about Northwestern Mutual, and we can dive into some of the more structured questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I, like a lot of people who work in the social space, I have kind of an unusual path that took me to get here. So I started out, 20 some odd years ago on the PR side, but then actually took a hard left and became a lawyer. So after, working as a lawyer for a few years, really felt that wasn't kind of going to bring me professional fulfillment. And so started looking elsewhere, and actually through entrepreneurship, founded my own startup. And as part of that role, really took on all of the marketing and CMO responsibilities for that startup. That's what led me back into the marketing world. And so from there, after selling my startup, jumped into tech marketing, and that's kind of what brought me up until today. But what's really interesting, and why I was so excited to see this particular topic for a panel, was that the last three companies I've worked at, IBM, Hilton, and now Northwestern Mutual, have all been around for over 100 years. So this idea of, a really strong legacy company is one that clearly I must enjoy, because I keep hopping to them. And I think the challenge of bringing social, a newer medium, to those established brands is really exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, as we discussed, Northwestern Mutual, they've certainly earned their spot, being a legacy brand and being around for 165 years. Can you set the scene a little bit for us and share a little bit more about, you had mentioned being referred to as a quiet company. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that and how that sort of, rooted itself and played in the origin story that it has today.
Absolutely. So Northwestern Mutual has been around for over 165 years, which is just kind of mind blowing to me. And what I think is so interesting is that marketing, direct to consumer marketing, wasn't really a big part of their focus until really just the last decade or so. It had earned this nickname as the quiet company because the idea was, if you needed the types of financial planning and insurance services that we provided, you would hear about it through word of mouth. Someone would pass you the name of their financial advisor on the golf course, or you would hear about it at church or a book club, or ask your parents who their financial advisor was. So it grew for decades and decades and decades without needing large scale advertising campaigns. And I think the really interesting part of that strength, anytime you have a company that has really built on that word of mouth, that you have the basics of a really strong product, right? And it's just a matter of then, actually getting the marketing to showcase that strength that you're already building on top of. So it's been a really exciting challenge for me in order to bring Northwestern Mutual onto social and how we appear and play in the social space, because it's a lot like having the resources and legacy and history of a big company, but in a lot of ways also having kind of feeling like a startup, because we are actually still defining out kind of foundational things about our social program. One of the projects that we actually just did this past year was a 100+ page social playbook, where we really dive very deep into who is our social audience, respective, we all have our segments as an overall marketing company, but who are we really focusing in on social specifically? How do we talk to them? How does our social tone of voice differ from our overall brand tone of voice? What colors do we maybe use on social to differentiate and break up our feed that we may not use on our regular everyday stationery? Just kind of redefining all of those basic foundational elements has been a great process for us. And I think it's so neat to have the resources of the big company, but also get to do that invention type work.
Absolutely. And I know, that social playbook is going to, take a huge role as you all move forward and develop the strategy. I know that you've put a ton of work in over the past 8 months. So it will be really interesting to learn more about how, being in a highly regulated industry, of course, there are guardrails that you have to work in. But can you talk a little bit about how that's, worked internally with the legal team and making sure that you're being able to be creative, but and obviously engaging the audience, but still keeping the peace with all the stakeholders over at internally?
Yeah, so this is where it does come in helpful that I actually am a lawyer myself. I've always approached at any company the legal team and other kind of stakeholders that we have is they're not there to prevent you from doing, whatever it is that you're seeking out to do. They want the company to be just as successful as you do. And so a lot of times it's just a matter of educating them on, what controls are available, why you would want to go after a certain thing. And so I approach our compliance folks and our legal folks with, if I just give them the information for the why, then they will help me figure out how to get to a yes. And I think just reframing that relationship as not an adversarial one, but as a supportive relationship, I think really helps. And especially in a heavily regulated industry like finance, it's definitely useful to be able to just go back and understand where they're coming from too, reading the actual regulations on what counts as an advertisement and how that affects, what you're allowed to put out, what our field representatives are able to put out, kind of going back to the basics of the world they're playing from. So then you both have that mutual understanding of what the other's motivation is. It really helps you get to that point of agreement.
Absolutely. And of course, your background on the legal side of things, I'm sure, is helpful for you too, to really understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, it is. I would say too, I think that I've been in a lot of companies where people don't realize you can actually say no to your lawyers, right? You can say, actually, I want to accept the risk and we should go for this thing anyway. The lawyers are there to advise you. They're there to give you guardrails. But, I think it's always worth having the discussion of like, if what we want to do is worth it, we can figure out creative ways to get there. And just because the first idea doesn't work out, there's always, a way to get to a yes, even if it's not the way that you originally maybe thought of it.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, I've worked on a ton of highly regulated, influencer programs and all of that. And I find one of the most important aspects is, first of all, understanding compliance and regulations that the platforms have in place. And then, of course, where you're allowed to play on your end. And of course, just setting those expectations, both with your legal team, them setting them, on your side, and then also communicating that to the influencers. So can you talk a little bit about how you're keeping up to date with those changes? Social platforms are changing constantly. and how you're keeping organized and ensuring that all of those regulations are communicated over to the influencers.
Yeah, so influencers are actually a pretty exciting part of our overall social strategy at Northwestern Mutual. And a lot of people are surprised to hear that. They think, well, like, how do you show someone doing financial planning with like a beauty influencer or something? But it's so important to us to be able to showcase the human side of the financial planning process. A lot of people, especially millennials, have a lot of fear or guilt or shame built into their financial background. They think, oh, I took out too many student loans in college, or I made some bad credit card decisions when I was younger. And I wish I could have bought a house, but I didn't have the down payment until just recently, or things like that. And so they think that they are not actually, that they don't know that they can be helped by having a financial advisor. They think of it as something that maybe only older, wealthier people actually participate in. And so the way that we use influencers really allows us to break down those barriers and showcase how real people work through real everyday financial situations with their advisor. And so when we bring on influencers, we find it really important to make sure every single influencer we work with actually has a meeting with a real Northwestern Mutual financial representative to talk through their financial plan, so that they understand and can speak authentically about what that planning experience is like. And oftentimes it's funny because we have seen time and time again that influencers that we have brought on and taken through that process actually end up turning into clients afterwards, because they realize how beneficial it can be for, especially at a career like content creation, that often has, a lot of different odd income streams and stuff. They really value their time to talk with the advisors. And so that's part of it, just having that initial meeting to guarantee authenticity. And then we also work with, a influencer agency, much like the one you work for, that, helps us to make sure that we're communicating all of those contractual compliance things, keeps on top of the project management. Having a partner when you're working with influencers is so valuable. I think it would take so many people if we tried to do this on our own in-house, that having an influencer agency to help support us is something that I highly recommend if you're able to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge undertaking, and having those, extra folks in place certainly is helpful. I think what would be interesting for me to understand is, as you've worked with influencers and built out this team and worked with your agency partner, what are some of the surprises that have come across your table in terms of influencers that have performed really well, or verticals that you maybe had to fight for a little bit to bring into a program that ended up, whether it be converting or driving a ton of website traffic? Can you tell us some of those stories?
Yeah, so we really think of social and especially organic social, boosted social influencers as upper funnel tactics. And so we focus more along things around awareness, engagements, and brand health metrics. So when we're looking at, do we want to pull this lever or this lever in terms of what marketing tactics we're going to deploy, we have tried to get really precise in what can be expected from any sort of execution. And the only way that you can do that is by looking to the data. So we've done I've been at Northwestern Mutual about 8 months now. In that time, we've already conducted 2 brand health studies, so that we can say, pretty authoritatively, like, if we do this, it's going to result in this for us. And when we work in social, when we do things like boosted, when we work with influencers, we're seeing comparable or even better in a lot of cases impacts on our high level awareness and consideration brand health metrics as compared to other more traditional tactics. We see influencers, for example, drives consideration for us at a much, much higher rate than traditional linear TV, for example, which is kind of surprising because you think of the amazing reach of something like linear TV, but with influencers, we are able to just make that really strong impression because people who are following that influencer already have that established trust, and it just really breaks through even more than traditional tactics.
Yeah, and I think from a credibility standpoint, they've already amassed this audience and they have a little bit of authority, to have these discussions, especially with education that you guys have provided. I'm wondering, there are certain instances where communication or conversations really make sense coming from the brand's voice, and in other cases, influencers can do a much better job of driving that consideration. So, are there, examples or situations where communication makes a lot more sense coming from the influencer? And then are there situations where you decide to pull back and focus a little bit more on brand direct messaging, depending on whether it be the pillar or the offering that you guys are pushing?
I think it's just authenticity is important no matter kind of where it comes from. And so a lot of what we do when we work with influencers is they're still telling the overall same message that we may have for our campaign. For example, right now in market, we have a campaign that is all about financial wellness, and the idea that financial wellness is just as critical to your overall health as physical wellness, physical fitness, emotional well-being. Financial wellness is so critical because if you don't have it, it creates anxiety, it creates stress, and that trickles down into your overall wellness. So, we have those high level brand messages that are going out via, all kinds of different channels, our email channels, our display, traditional digital channels, things like that. But then with influencers, we're able to just tweak it a little bit. So we're still going after how we tell that very human story, but by working with fitness and wellness influencers. And so they then get to shed their light on it. They're already experts in that fitness and wellness field. And so they can say, hey, I've studied fitness, I've studied wellness my whole life, and I can tell you my personal story of how this does connect into your overall wellness and how important it is to put your finances, just as important as you would, going to the gym every week or something. So that I think is how we bring them in. It's not about the influencers telling a different story than what we're telling at the brand level. It's just making sure that no matter who is communicating it, it's authentic.
Absolutely. And you mentioned studies a little bit earlier, so I'd love to dive into that because understanding obviously where influencers are driving that consideration is quite important to you all. Can you speak to any specific tools or studies that you use to follow the consumer's journey through the cycle, whether it be, moving them from an investment customer over to an insurance customer? And then also how you leverage paid media tactics, retargeting. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mentioned this earlier, but I'm kind of a data geek. Definitely love to be tracking that at pretty much all stages that we can. Obviously, it's getting more challenging with changes in different platforms to do really full journey tracking of an individual from the very first, marketing touch you have with them to when they end up, becoming a client. So we look at it from a variety of different sources and try and paint that kind of multi-touch or, MMA version of like what that journey looks like. So we have a great data and insights team that we rely on that really looks at the customer and what they're experiencing. They do all of our segmentation and kind of more traditional things like focus groups or surveys. So we take that piece of it. Then we have our analytics team who is really looking at from a CRM perspective of like, who is coming into our website, what are they doing when they get there, what pages are they visiting, and how does that affect their overall journey? What are the conversion rates, all of that. And then also we're looking at those brand health studies that I mentioned earlier. Website traffic alone doesn't paint the total picture, but because someone doesn't necessarily, especially in financial services, they're not going to see a tweet and think, hey, I'm moving my entire life savings over to that company based on a tweet, right? They're going to do research. And so knowing that having a really strong brand awareness, having really strong preference and advocacy with our existing customers, all of those kind of things that are studied through traditional brand lift studies, Nielsen studies, things like that, those are equally important to getting that full picture of how our marketing is working, and then trying to pull them all together to tell that comprehensive story of, how we're doing. So we use a lot of those. Sometimes I know it can be challenging to be like, I'm doing reporting again for hours on end. But I think having that data at the end of the day, it makes us smarter marketers. It makes us just better at what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I think it would be great to hear, what advice or methods can you share that have helped, to prove that success? And I know that you said it's been 8 months. And so you focused a lot of your attention initially on building out, the social playbook. And now we're starting to collect data and really understand what is and is not working, which influencers are really driving some of those, upper funnel conversations. And so when we look at success, obviously it varies by company, also by, place that you are within the organization. So budget approvals really can be, different across the board. But I think for a lot of folks here, we have conversations about a full funnel strategy, and it can be really hard to get more budget if, we don't have a ton of time at an organization. So what practices, I don't know if you can speak to them specifically, but what are some of the items that you've put in place to really help you to keep that data focus, and also what you're looking into as you continue to build out your team?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a constant struggle, right? Regardless of what channel you're in. But there is also a lot of education that you have to do with executives around the company. I mean, a lot of times executives still have a somewhat outdated view that social media is free. You don't need to put any paid behind that. You just go and post some things and people will read it. So making sure that they're up to date on, the latest in the algorithms and what your organic reach is actually going to look like, that you aren't just going to raise followers, but you actually have, other KPIs that you're reaching, and then kind of telling that story for them through the data points that you have of what it could look like to get that budget through social, as compared to if you put the budget to, a different type of campaign. One thing at Northwestern Mutual that we really have to balance is like, how much money are we putting towards things like conversion campaigns versus how much money are we putting towards brand building campaigns? And there's trade-offs to doing either one. And you can do either one on social quite well, but it's just different. So having a really strong strategy overall at the company to know where the priorities are, making sure the executives that are making those decisions are well educated about what social can and cannot do for you. And then, just tracking and improving out that when you are given budget, that you're making the most of it and really turning around good, solid ROI.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we talked about earlier too was around, testing and learning. And of course, as marketers, we want to dive in and really understand the potential of whether it be a new platform or new focus within social. How are you balancing some of those testing and learning phases while still staying within, the guidelines that you have to work with? And also, do you feel like that, helps or hurts when it comes to having some of those extra restrictions and your, I guess, tunnel vision to make sure that you're staying on brand and having those conversations?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the end of the day, finance in the financial world, any regulated industry like that, we're just not going to be quite as nimble as like a CPG or retail company that can really, dive in with the newest thing. Whenever a new feature comes out, we have to go through testing to make sure that we can compliantly use that feature, make sure that we can track any customer information that comes in, make sure that it's retained for the regulations that apply to the insurance and financial industry. So, that does create some challenges there. And I think that the key then is not always just focusing on the shiny new object. Yes, we'll eventually get to, a spot where a new feature rolls out. It may take us a month before we're on it, whereas some brands jumped on it the very first day it was available, but we're going to get there. So in the meantime, it's about making sure that you are putting your best foot forward in the features and channels and whatever that may be that you do have access to. Because a lot of times people get very distracted by the shiny object when they're not even doing the basics right. So I think getting the basics really, really solid, that enables you to be able to go after those test and learn type things. Not to mention, when you're getting the basics right, your compliance team, your legal partners, all of those groups, they will have more confidence and allow you kind of a longer leash to play and test and learn because they know that you're understanding the world that you're operating in. So it can be a challenge, you know, there's no doubt about that working in a regulated industry, but I think at the end of the day, you know, it's just about definitely making sure that you're communicating and educating the wider stakeholders in your group so you can all get to the best possible presentation of your brand.
Absolutely. I was just looking to see what questions we have. I think we may have time for one more, and I just want to make sure I'm being respectful of everyone's time.
And I apologize again for no video. We don't know what's going on for anyone out there, but it's not letting me turn my camera on today. I even put on makeup for you guys.
Well, we can still see your beautiful face on on the photo there. So I think that the last and final question really, and I think you are the perfect, you know, brand partner to answer this is, you know, when we look at any new or emerging brands who want to build a legacy of their own, how do you recommend people look to modernize but not lose their legacy? And conversely, obviously, new brands, as they're building a legacy, how do they stay true to themselves through and through as they grow?
Yeah. You know, I think at the end of the day, marketing can only go so far to help you build a legacy. It has to be about your customer, the product or service that you're providing for them, and how you're taking their feedback to make it better. So I would, you know, my advice to any kind of startup or newer, younger company is, first of all, know your values as a company, know what you stand for and live those values. And, you know, for Northwestern Mutual, that has been, I think, key to their success because they are a company that, you know, for 165 years has really fulfilled that promise of serving their customers. But so I think that's step one, knowing your values. And then two, taking feedback. Nobody's going to get it right out of the bat every single time. So being in touch with your users, listening for what they're saying and what they're telling you. Often, you know, they'll tell you without you even asking, as long as you're collecting the feedback. So that's maybe not squarely within the marketing realm, but I think those are things that I think of as key. You can't market your way away from lack of customer support or a bad product. You got to take care of those essentials first, and then marketing is just the icing on the cake.
Agreed completely. And I think, you know, some of those pieces that we talked about earlier, like, you know, when we see brand content versus influencer content, a lot of the times the questions that you'll get are actually really insightful and can turn into an entire conversation, you know, within that new customer. And so oftentimes we've used those to actually build out content strategy just based off questions or feedback alone. So I find that obviously you can't market your way, you know, out of a specific situation, but you can certainly use those tools and features of social to drive potential changes within the organization too.
Absolutely. Living your culture, living your values, and, you know, being open to feedback and advice along the way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Whitney.
Well, thank you guys. And again, apologies for the lack of video. I don't know what's happening. I've been on Zoom calls all day with videos. So
so weird, but hey, it worked out anyway. And, you know, so appreciate you working with us. And I know we've had, this happens, you know, it always happens and we're able to roll with the punches. So still, exactly. So still so glad to have you both here. Thank you so much, Whitney and Amelia. Great panel. And hopefully we can have you back again soon, Whitney, where we can, you know, ensure that your video is all ready to go.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Have a great day, guys.
Well, we are on to our final panel for the day. Last but not least, because we're really excited for this session. So we're going to be hearing from Tori Carter, who works in brand and creative at KFC Global. And moderating this session will be Marty Berman, the VP of Sales for North America and LATAM at Admix. So we will welcome our final group to the stage. Hi, Marty. How are you?
Hi, good. How are surviving?
Yeah, long time no see. It's been a while. I feel like it was the last Chicago event that we were at together. So good to connect virtually again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It looks like Tori's hopping on. Hopefully we have
Okay, fantastic.
no video issues for her. Tori, can you hear us?
Well,
I can hear you guys. I am just trying to sort out the tech. I'm almost there. Just getting.
Okay. Well, we can talk. Well, listen, we had a great week last week with Brand Innovators at the Super Bowl.
I'm so glad.
I'll promote and talk about that. It was just a phenomenal event. Great attendance by just so many great brands and speakers. So that was a really well produced event at the Porsche Experience out in LA. So.
Yeah. No, we had a really great time getting to be back for our first, in-person and hybrid event, first hybrid event ever, but back in person since, before the pandemic started. So appreciate the positive feedback, and looks
Absolutely.
like we got here. So I'll hand it over to you guys to kick it off. Really excited.
Fantastic. Nice to see you again,
Emily.
Tori.
Hey, Marty. Sorry about that. I was trying to get this fancy background up.
I know, right? Exactly. So listen, I'm really excited for our conversation today, and we're here as we talked about with Tori Carter. Tori is the Senior Brand Marketing Manager at KFC Global, and so excited to dive into the details a little bit more about her specialty and where she fits within the KFC family and how she's been leveraging that. So super excited to talk to her about that. And before we kick off, I've got to do my my little spiel about Admix and tell everybody what we are and who we are. And as simply as I can put it, we're the gateway for brands to enter the metaverse. And I know everybody right now is going, well, what does that really mean? I don't even know what that means. And we've got a very simple approach, very three-step approach. We help brands navigate which meta worlds they should be in based on their activation. We then help them build. We've got a team of over 30 developers, and then we help them activate it. And what makes our model unique is that we mitigate the risk for the brands. We own the land, so we can do a short-term rental or a lease to own for a long-term. As I mentioned, we help build. And then more importantly, also besides activating, because it's really digital experiential, is that we are actually able to execute this transaction with IOs. So don't have to worry about converting any of your marketing dollars to cryptocurrency. And try to, well, you could if you wanted to watch your finance guy's head explode, or women. But anyway, but enough about me and Admix. We're here to talk about Tori and to hear all the wonderful things that she's been doing. I thought it was just great, Tori, when one of the first things you mentioned was the fact I can't address anything that has to do with KFC in the US. So, with that caveat up there, I really would love to hear if you could share with the audience a little bit more about your role and the eye-opening expansion that KFC has been on for quite a while that certainly, again, surprised me in terms of how vast the KFC empire has expanded.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to be fair, I definitely could share a little bit on the KFC US team, of course.
Of course, I know.
We work very closely with them, but
I know.
It's in my role, it's, all my friends and family are always like, that's so cool what KFC is doing. And I'm like, it is so cool what those guys are doing over there. Because as you said, Marty, my role is I sit in the global division and the global office within the US. So we basically act as kind of the spoke or the center of the brand for all of our international markets. And I have a couple of slides I can pop up just to share.
Sure, that would be great.
With you guys. Yeah. Just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea. Let's see if this works. We're like a team.
Look at that.
Are they up there and everything?
They're up there. Yeah, we can see them. Starting with discussion.
Do we see KFC at a glance now?
We do.
Beautiful. Cool. So yeah, we like to refer to ourselves as kind of the universal fried chicken restaurant, because I think while many of you on the call are probably super familiar with us as this US brand fried chicken, we're actually quite large, and we've been a top global brand now for 20 years. So we were recognized again by Interbrand last year, one of 3 QSRs. So we're super, super proud of that. And that's of course measured around global scale and impact, not just showing up in the US. And our story is, I think it's such a great brand for this topic today, because we really are a heritage brand. So it's finger looking good, and it's been that way for more than 75 years. So it started a long, long time ago with Colonel Harlan Sanders, who I'm pretty sure you probably all know who he is. I think we did a study one year that he's one of the most recognizable faces in the world. But he created this finger looking good recipe more than 75 years ago, secret herbs and spices scratched out on the back of the door to his kitchen. And he had quite a journey into taking the brand to where it is today. So this is a little bit small and hard to read, but really an incredible person, Colonel Sanders, on his journey to making the world's most famous fried chicken. So he had all sorts of different jobs, I think, that taught him the resilience that you need to create one of the most famous recipes in the world. But he perfected that recipe in 1940 and then partnered up in 1952 with Pete Harmon, who was our first franchisee in Salt Lake City. And then from there, he went on to be the spokesperson to the brand after he sold it in 1964, continued on as the face of KFC almost until his death. So really this incredible story of this incredible man, and it has turned into this big global legacy. So I think people are often quite surprised to hear about how global KFC really is, but we have more than 25,000 restaurants around the world. We're in more than 145 countries. I think there's total like 185 in the entire world. So we are on our way to fried chicken domination.
You're almost there.
We're counting it down. Every 6 hours, a new KFC opens somewhere in the world. And then we employ over 800,000 team members and over 25,000 restaurant general managers. And I think no matter where we are in the world, what's really important to us is that heritage brand, those distinctive assets, making sure they're showing up consistently, no matter where we build a new restaurant. So these should all probably really, really familiar to you guys. I think, we're really fortunate to have a very, very distinctive brand with a very, very distinctive set of assets that we can lean into. These being the top 5 global assets around the world. So of course, the Colonel head, the Colonel himself, our iconic logo, our iconic bucket of chicken, our tagline, it's finger looking good, and those 3 red and white stripes combo. And then I think the other thing we're really intentional about as we show up on the world is the stories we're trying to tell. And I think one of the previous speakers spoke to that as well. So it doesn't really matter the creative execution of it. We want to be telling the same stories and within the same brand world everywhere we go. And for us, that's around being finger looking good. So it's always about our craveable, delicious, world famous fried chicken that you just can't resist. You can't wait to take another bite of. It's about doing things the right way. There's probably a lag here. There we go. So that's around our food, planet, and people commitments. So serving up, the highest quality chicken that we can, doing good by the planet. And of course, we're a very people first business. So really looking after our team members and our communities, no matter where we are in the world. And of course, no matter what story we're telling, we want to make sure that it is in the spirit of the Colonel. So for those of you that don't know, he was a very feisty, entertaining, fun guy. And we try to bring that kind of tonality in that world to life, no matter where we are in the world and the stories that we're telling. So just thought would be a fun little intro into who we are to get started before we start talking about the craziness of other parts of the world.
Yeah, no, listen, that was awesome. It's always better to show visuals if you can. It really has a bigger impact. And so two comments. So first of all, love that the Colonel was born September 9th because I was born September 8th. So
there you go. Commonalities. You've got the glasses
exactly.
and the facial hair going on.
Exactly.
Too,
yeah, I just need to trim down the facial hair, just trim it down a little bit. And then when you have time, I've got this great KFC movie that that I want to produce.
I love it. Let's talk.
We'll talk about it offline. We won't bore anybody here with it, but it's very funny. So listen, I think that was great. And, I think one of the things that was really important that when we talked and that you obviously just showed with the fact that you guys are everywhere pretty much, well, with the exception of those other 40 or so countries you haven't quite reached yet. I think, and it's coming through in everything that everybody talks about now as a brand, is you've got to be authentic, right? You've got to be community focused. With all these different countries and languages and cultures, how is it that KFC manages, and how do you keep track of, being relevant with all those different marketing campaigns? You're obviously a franchise-based, organization, which always leads to different challenges. So how do you leverage that? How do you make sure that what you're doing is relevant? And I know that, you have your traditional menu, but then you also keep some things that are, true to the local scene to make sure you modernize and contemporize, make it more contemporary to that region. If you could share with everybody a little bit about, how do you manage that? What does it look like? What does it feel like in different countries? I think that'd be really great.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's actually like the magic of working with franchisees around the world. And it's also the magic of having a very decentralized creative business too. So in my role, again, I'm sort of this wagon wheel. So my job is to really make sure that heritage part of the brand, the stuff that we know back to the beginning, brand 101, that we know works, that we know is a part of who we are, regardless of where you show up in the world. So that comes down to our distinctive assets, our global brand positioning. I think what's critical to the success of showing up as a relevant brand in all the different markets that we operate in is that really strong partnership with our franchisees, as well as we've got local business units across the world as well that partner directly with those franchisees. So it's kind of my job and those business units' jobs to make sure that the franchisees feel the brand as much as we do. And then the franchisees in turn can bring to us those local insights about the market, what really makes the consumer tick, what's important to them from the world's most famous fried chicken shop if we show up in, say, Mongolia. So that's where it's kind of this magic combination of we've got this global brand icon, but how we localize it is really through working with those local partners, working through our local business management units who have a really deep grasp and understanding of the local culture and how we can show up in it in a relevant.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's got to be just so much to manage and go through, and maybe I'll save that for one of our extra questions if we have time, because I'd love to hear a little bit more about just the day-to-day management of all those and the approval process that have to go through. So we'll put a pin in that one. And I know that we talked about showing some commercials. Do you want to try and show some?
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple. Awesome. Let's hope that the video gods treat me nice on this, but I thought it would be fun.
One so far.
One for one so far. Let's see if it keeps us going. So are we back? We're screen sharing.
You've started, and it looks like we're good.
Awesome. Yes, I thought it would be fun, kind of set you guys up, showed you guys a little bit, reminded you what our distinctive brand assets are, and then also talked a little bit about kind of the different associations or the stories that we try to tell around the world. So I think as Marty and I were just chatting about, obviously the way those stories show up and the way those assets show up need to be done in a locally relevant. So I thought it would be fun to kind of take you guys through a quick spin of a couple of different markets. And we'll start with France. You'll have to let me know if we have sound with a thumbs up, Marty, but
okay,
I'll play
yeah.
this.
No sound, I don't think.
No sound, uh-oh. Let me pause it.
I'm wondering if there's something you have to do on your end. But you can kind of, I think it'll still kind of communicate. It would be great if we could, but let's not stress over it if we can't.
Cool. We'll keep playing.
Yeah, keep playing.
Maybe I can narrate over. But obviously, this is a really great example from France. They're using Colonel. They've toned him down. They've modernized him. They're really emphasizing the crispiness, the preparation of the chicken, because crispy is a really important quality to the consumer in France when they're looking for fried chicken. The iconic bucket shows up. I wish you guys could hear it because it's this amazing soundtrack too that the agency actually created that became so popular in France that it ended up on Spotify. So it was a fun way to tap into culture as well. And then this next one is from our Australia team, and I'll just pop play on that as well. You'll have to listen to me narrate, which is not nearly as exciting as the actual commercial. But this was during the pandemic era. So they were showing how, everyone's at home trying to make the best out of it. And a really fun example of how our bucket still brings the fried side of life, even in the worst circumstances. So Australia is all about, from their point, trying to liven up the here and now, and they make sure they're in their advertising, again, in that very fun, feisty, Colonel sort of spirited tone of voice that I was referencing earlier. This one's from Latin America, so a little more intense. I think you can kind of feel those Latin cultural vibes, but very much around the craveability of our chicken. So they came up with this fun campaign around KFC that described that kind of irresistible moment where you're craving our fried chicken, and you can't help but go for it. I think that one cut a little bit short, but you guys get the idea.
Yeah, definitely a different tone.
Totally different tone, yeah, but still in the KFC world for sure. And I think when you can hear the voiceover, even though it's kind of a different tone, you still hear the lightness. It's obviously tongue in cheek. KFC is a made up adrenaline kind of play. So yeah. Still in that spirit of the Colonel. And then finally, this one's a little bit more speaking to the purpose work, but this is from our South Africa market. I'm assuming there's still no sound. So
yeah, still no sign, but
yeah,
you can get you know what, there's still that very distinct difference between the cultures that you can definitely tell in terms of how the visuals are coming across.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to play this last video, but I don't know if it'll have the same kind of effect without sound, so I might just cut it.
All right,
but,
I think we get the vibe, right? We get the idea is that it's taking that the special secret of the brand message and the brand feeling and communicated it and marrying it really with the local vibe in a cool, hip way that's relevant and important to that community.
Yeah, that's right. And then the last ad in there that I did just want to speak to, because I think obviously, I think most of the time when you're operating in a business like this, we never do a global commercial or a global creative or a global campaign, or we've rarely done it in the past because, the world is moving in such different places, and what's relevant and topical in different regions varies. But actually in 2020, as a result of the pandemic, and I'll have to let you guys Google it because I'm not able to play the video, but it was kind of this amazing moment where we found this moment in time where actually almost every single country is going through the exact same thing at the same time. We're all in this pandemic. We're all like working through it. And it was the early phases kind of, before vaccines where there was some solutions in some markets, but not in the others. And we were able to do a really fun campaign as a global team where we actually ran the same creative across over half of our markets, censoring our tagline, because obviously during a pandemic, it's not okay to lick your fingers. So we kind of tackled that one head on. So I'm getting some instructions in the chat on how to.
There you go.
Maybe we can, if we have time at the end, I can play that video for you because it's super fun.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks for sharing those. It really communicates, I think, even without the sound, as I talked about before, the look and the difference, the feel of it. You can definitely tell the communities or the regions that were being focused based on kind of how it was being shot and the visual cues to it. And when we spoke the other day, one of the things that is such a challenge when doing all of these, and I just touched upon it a little earlier, and that is there's just so many challenges working on the international side of the business. And we talked a little bit before the other day about some of the challenges. Do you mind sharing with everyone, on an international scale and doing this kind of work and working with franchisees in different markets and making sure everything is, brand safe, but at the same time on point? How do you, what have been the biggest challenges or two or three that you faced working internationally from that perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I think one, especially when we're kind of in and talking about the world of creative, is while the markets are all doing their different things and they're all producing creative that's relevant and local to them, the reality is that we are still a global brand, and to a lot of consumers, they don't understand the difference between, KFC Australia or KFC South Africa or KFC Russia. So I think one challenge that we have sometimes is when someone does really good work, or if someone does actually some controversial work, is that it's likely that it will travel if it starts to hit earned media from a brand and creative standpoint. So we've definitely had some instances in the past. The UK is a great example. There's a certain sense of humor, I think, that they're able to get away with the brand in the feisty space, where they can really push the envelope a little bit, and they can get quite edgy with their brand and their communications. And it's still within the brand positioning. It's definitely in the spirit of the kernel, but it's not the same type of sense of humor that, for example, would be acceptable in the Middle East or even parts of Asia, even Latin America. So we've definitely had instances in the past where, we'll have one market wanting to do this really awesome piece of creative for their market, but then we have to think about how it might affect other markets in turn. And then of course, cultural holidays, things like that. As you start to get the brand into joining cultural conversations, there can be differing opinions on things based on what part of the world you're in. So it starts to turn into a very interesting, as the brand starts to join big conversations, starts to try to play in culture. We have to make sure we're still showing up as unified, but also letting them kind of have that relevance. So I think that's probably our biggest challenge when it comes to brand expression and brand creative.
So sort of the cultural relevance without necessarily stepping on any cultural taboos at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which
yeah.
is,
And doing
it's
what's
hard to
right.
navigate. It's definitely hard to navigate that. And, and I imagine you've got to have a lot of local input from your local teams and agencies and franchisees, because at least you've got a good test market, right? You never want to go in somewhere and find that your ad or commercial is completely offensive to the local culture, instead of like really taking that into consideration, which is, probably why you've had so much success expanding internationally, is because you've taken that approach.
Yep.
And, it's so important. Even regionally in the US, everybody's got different cultural relevance. And if you're tone deaf to that, you can completely miss out on it. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that, because that's really, it's exciting to hear. And I think, if you're focused on one market, you sometimes forget from an international standpoint that how much more amplified that is at an international level. So, you've had such a unique path to where you are today. You've been in a variety of different industries. You've been in the entertainment business, and you've worked, both in talent and as a talent. You went back and got your master's degree at Northwestern, which led to a strong career in PR and marketing, working for some heritage brands. Talk a little bit about your background and how, that what you learned in the past really kind of helped, what you're doing now, or, what were the big pivots that you kind of had to make in terms of your career?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, the biggest learning I have now in retrospect is I used to be pretty embarrassed about my background and try to hide it or fudge my resume to make it look that I've always been on the singular track of brand marketing and PR. And I think what I've learned, and I encourage everyone else to kind of have this mindset too, is your experience is your experience. And it actually is what makes you unique and marketable in some ways. So now, instead of shying away from it, I'm really proud of it. And it's just my journey, and it's a little bit different. But yeah, as you mentioned, my undergraduate degree is actually, I went to a fine arts conservatory. So I have a bachelor in fine arts and acting, which on paper is going to get you far. I'll tell you what. So that took me out to Los Angeles in my early 20s. And as you mentioned, I worked as both an assistant in a talent management office as well as in a casting office. So was kind of exposed to marketing and commercials kind of that way, in a more traditional way. And then I also did some acting, primarily commercial voiceover work. And I remember sitting on a set one day towards the end of my very short-lived acting career. And I was like, I have the most boring job in this room. Like, I'm literally just told to sit here in a corner with my book, like for most of the day, until they like call me up for 5 minutes to dance like a chicken. And then they tell me to go sit down again while they do all the like cool creative and production and think about the strategy. And I was like, this is the worst. So I ended up going to sit with the marketing agency that was on set actually creating the ad. And I just talked to them like all day, and I was learning about what they were doing, and just got super interested in it. So decided to apply for graduate programs in marketing and advertising and go back to school. And then coming out of school, I had was mindset on going into an ad agency, being executive. I wanted to work in advertising. I wanted to make commercials. And then I got an offer at Yum Brands to work on Pizza National as an internal communications analyst. And I was like, I don't even really know what that is, but I have a lot of student debt and this pays it better than that job pays it. So I guess I'm going to go be an internal communications analyst. And it's led me to this incredible career in communications, public relations, crisis management, proactive PR, and now in brand and creative marketing. So, which is ironic because the role I'm in now is a very like long around the rosy path to what I had initially been after almost 10 years ago. So yeah, I guess my message there is just would encourage everybody to be open-minded. I think I've learned so much about all the different roles that I've had, and kind of let the journey guide you and trust where the universe is taking you. I guess it sounds kind of
don't be
cheesy,
afraid.
Yeah.
I wonder if the agency execs who you spoke to 10 years on set would have realized that you would have gotten to your career where you are now based off of that conversation.
They probably had
right?
no idea what they were crafting.
Exactly. They were creating you. But I think that's also a great takeaway for everybody is, you never know what conversation is going to impact your life in a way that's going to take you in a totally new direction where you could have tremendous success. You just got to go out on a limb sometimes and really, as we like to say, skate to where the puck is, but you've got to kind of put yourself out there, right? You've got to be in those situations. You've got to ask questions because you just never know what you're going to learn. And we're on a journey, and there's not any, path that is the right one.
It's a mentality they taught us as like young aspiring artists, like is where I learned that. They always said, say yes to everything, because you never know, like the silliest, smallest student film that could end up being like, the next Steven Spielberg. So always say yes, always jump in on any project you have time for. And I think I've always kept that mentality, which sometimes gets you in trouble because then you're like,
does,
oh God,
yeah.
I mean,
you have
yes
to be
too
able
many
to say
things.
no. Right, exactly. You have to be able to say no.
Yes.
But I think it's about that openness, right? That you're open to learning and exploring and seeing what else is out there, and you just never know where it can take you. And it's I think certainly a really important takeaway here is that in any role or in any whatever you're doing, you have the ability to change. Just a question of learning, right? And you could run international marketing for KFC one day.
Dream big. I'm not running it yet. I'm just helping.
Not yet.
Again, I'm just a little wheel on the spoke.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Don't give me too much credit.
I've promoted
I appreciate that, Marty. That's very nice. Thank you.
Of course. And I think that one of the things that we also talked about, which I thought was really interesting, is that because you don't specifically focus. I know that so many times people think I want to get into marketing and it's about commercials or, like you did, but you never even probably were open to the idea because you weren't exposed to the international side of the business to even know what that even meant. Right. So help us understand, was that when you originally thought of this, did you think about getting to the international side of the business, or was it just sort of a natural progression of what you were doing? And it's just, you're like, kind of that same mentality. Yeah, I'm open to it. Let's see what it brings.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was definitely a little bit of it's where I happened to land. So just happened to land in the international side of the business out of college based on what they were looking for. And it's definitely always piqued my interest. So I've been an avid traveler almost my whole life. And then did a global perspectives version in my grad program where we did some time in Japan and China, kind of studying again, how brands translate kind of in different markets around the world, or how a US brand comes to life in a different market around the world. So it was definitely something of interest. I think if you have the opportunity to work on international marketing, it's super cool. It's just like getting that kind of exposure to different cultures and people around the world, and getting to think about, how something shows up one way in one region and another way in another. And just, I've been so fortunate to, I think I mentioned in the upfront around KFC, we're definitely a people business, all the way from our restaurants to our support centers and the people I've met around the world. Like, it's an insanely cool thing to say, like, I literally have friends around the world that I could call on where you are. So I think if you have the opportunity to kind of take a brand and figure out how it works in the context of an entire different culture, I would definitely encourage you to jump on it, or try to find yourself an opportunity to do so. Because I think it's a different way of thinking for sure. And yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, and I think, you know, the reverse can be said of international brands trying to come to the US as well, because I've certainly seen some disconnects there. And I think that, you know, you can definitely, isn't in any life, you can just get kind of myopic in terms of the way that you view your brand, your importance, your so many other things, without taking into consideration that that's great here, but that doesn't mean that that's guaranteed over here. And I've got to think more about how I'm approaching it to make sure it's authentic. Yeah. So that's that. Thanks so much for sharing that. And then, you know, we talked a little bit how you kind of found your way to the international side of the business, and we've touched on, you know, earlier, like what have been some of the biggest challenges. But outside of just the marketing, like, you know, from just a day-to-day standpoint, what have you found? I mean, is it the hours? I mean, if you've got 25,000 restaurants all over, you know, like, do you sleep? Do you have calls at all hours of the day? And like, what are the like if somebody was thinking about, you know, getting onto the international or had an opportunity right now, what advice would you give them outside of doing it and it's fun, but like, what are some of the things to consider also that would be pulling on you personally, professionally, that you probably didn't consider?
Yeah, so it's 100% odd hours. That's spot on. I will say I do sleep a
Clearly,
lot more.
I've got some experience there, by the way.
There you go. You understand. I'll say I sleep a lot more now that I'm not in crisis management. So definitely that one. Yep. That one will push the hours a little bit. But I think you just kind of adjust to it. And I think in this new day and age, in this world where, you know, work has gotten a lot more flexible, I think for a lot of us, it does make it easier to manage. I think you just have to be comfortable in the gray. You have to be fluid. Your day might look like, I think I learned the hard way, you can't start every day at 5 a.m. and work until 10 p.m. So like you stop in the middle of the day and you take your kind of hours there. I think I became a mom in 2020, and I'll have another one coming later this year. Yeah. And so that's been a lesson in itself of learning. Thank you again. But like blocking the time, like there's an hour and a half window where my kid's home at night and I'm going to eat dinner with him. And so you just make sure that you're not kind of intruding on that time to sort of keep that family life balance, I suppose. Jet lag's real thing. When we haven't been traveling obviously for obvious reasons for the last couple of years, but you know, just remembering that. And I will say that's a challenge too, when you're on the other side of the world and you get off, I've had instances where you get off the plane, you go to the hotel, you shower, and then you go to the office, and you know, that's how it rolls. But but I would say it's definitely, again, it's like worth the experiences that you get from it, if you have the opportunity, for sure.
Yeah, no, I've worked for a couple of international companies, and the time differences are really hard. When I started here at Admix, I was we had one other guy, but he had lived in the UK, so he was more, you know, and traveled and worked internationally, and like a lot of our calls started at like 7 a.m. For me, and I was fine with it. I didn't complain. I didn't say anything. But as my team kind of grew and our more presence there, they started to change it to make it more workable hours. And I didn't mind, because I'd get up, but then at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, why am I dragging so much? I'm like, oh, because I've been on call since 7 a.m. You know, it makes for a longer day. But to your point, you've got to, as a result of that, you have to juggle that management of your time a little bit differently. But it is nice, except when I did have that 4:30 a.m. call that one time. But you know what I did? You know what I did? I got on the call, and you know what? Ever since then, we've never had calls. You know, people are more conscious of the time difference.
You do what you can. We've got a lot of support folks in California too, and they quite often get hit with those 4 a.m.s, 4:30 a.m.s.
Oh yeah.
And then I always feel bad for the Australia market. Anytime we try to do a true cross global, it's like 11 p.m. for them, and we're starting at 6 a.m. So you really can't go much earlier.
Fantastic. I think we're getting to that point. We'll throw it out to the audience real quickly before we have to go, and see if there's any final questions for Tori.
And if there aren't, I did figure out how to use the sound, so we can watch the global creative campaign. If
there you go. Let's do. Here we go. Nick Paul's dad has
oh my gosh,
been watching you. He's flying down to visit Nick tomorrow.
This is so funny. Hey, Pete. So Nick Paul is one of my best friends from college, friends for like 15 years. So I know Pete very well. That's awesome.
That's awesome. You never know who's watching these. I get that all the time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, if you want to show the videos, have we got enough time?
Yeah, that'd be a great way to end off. I think that'd be a perfect way to conclude the day. So yeah, let's do it.
Go.
Let's do it. Okay. And let me press sorry guys, we're a Teams organization.
You know what? I have the opposite problem.
Okay. How'd I do? Did I get the?
We're seeing it.
Okay.
I think when you share the screen, you also have to click like share sound. So if you pressed that, then you should be good to go.
All right, let's try. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
Finger licking good.
Yes, we can hear it.
So, what do you do when one of the world's most famous slogans becomes one of the world's least appropriate?
Main way viruses spread is when you touch your own mouth, nose, or eyes.
It's finger licking good. This is a special report.
So KFC is changing its slogan for now. KFC is temporarily
dropping the slogan, finger looking good.
KFC has been saying the same thing about its chicken for 64 years.
The slogan de KFC
is no more.
It's the latest victim of the pandemic,
as it doesn't fit with COVID messaging on hygiene.
It got a lot of people talking, with coverage in 97 countries, nearly 2 billion impressions. And without ever actually saying the slogan in question, we got everyone else to do the work for us.
It's finger licking good.
Finger
licking good.
Finger licking good.
Finger licking good.
Finger licking good.
Finger licking good. Finger licking good.
That fried chicken place has got some free sort of mentions. That was very nice, isn't it?
Oh, that's great.
I love that. That was awesome. I'm so glad we got to watch.
What a great way to close. That was, I mean, honestly, kudos to you guys, because if there's like that's got to be one of the most challenging things to try and figure out, and you guys did it. You nailed it. That's awesome.
It was a fun time for sure. And again, that kind of magic moment where the whole world was in the same place, which never happened. So we got to execute global brand creative. So super fun.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Tori. And thank you, brand innovators. Thank you, KFC and Yum Brand.
Yeah, great way to end off. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll hope to see you guys again soon.
Thanks, Emily.
See you later.
Thanks, Tori.
Guys. Bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you so much to all of our audience members who tuned in as well, and all of our amazing speakers throughout the day. Such an incredible program, and we're so excited to continue our live cast schedule next week. So we hope you guys will all tune in for our next program. And until then, we hope to see you guys again soon. Have a good one.